Wow,
See if I can stumble my way through this intro
back
that I've
on
mostly
the
forgotten.
back on the wagon, or
Back on the toilet seat,
back on the
as they say.
chair, back on the ivory throne, crapping
The
out
ivory
opinions for
throne. That's what they call
everyone to hear.
podcasting.
Yeah.
On the
If
ivory
it's not,
throne.
it's what they should call it. Yeah.
You probably should.
You want some
Okay.
unsolicited opinions? Because we got them.
What's up and welcome to NeverLag. We are back. Some said it couldn't be done.
After a brief
And yet-
hiatus.
And after a brief hiatus, exactly. The success was too much. We had to step down for a little bit.
Yeah.
A little overwhelming. But yeah, we're here. We're here with a belated recap, kind of looking back on the past year in gaming in 2023. I'm one of your hosts, Levi, joined as always by the man who fell in the pit, Zach, and our superstar celebrity guest, Calvin, aka the Bulge. Is that
I had forgotten about that.
your name on the streets?
I worked hard to forget about that.
Welcome. So yeah, we couldn't get Phil Spencer on, but Calvin, he agreed to join us today. So we're going to take a look back at the year. Yeah, we were a little bit late here in doing this, but I'm really glad that we were able to actually sit down and do this. I didn't think it was going to happen, and it'll be great to talk about 2023 in general. Before we get started, Calvin, let's hear a little bit about, I'm going to put you on the spot, a little bit about your gaming background. What are your credentials?
My credentials. I feel like I only became a real gamer within the past few years. I spent most of my life just very, very casually gaming. But within the past few years, I started more seriously really enjoying games, being more selective about games, and also taking on more challenging games. So
Yeah,
for
sure. So what were your core games though? Where have you come from?
My childhood is built upon Ratchet and Clank, the original Ratchet and Clank on PlayStation, yeah. PlayStation 2, Gran Turismo, things like that. That's my core.
I know. I asked you just because I wanted to hear my favorite games. So all the hand-me-downs that you got from me, basically.
Yep.
What wonderful games did you like that I made you play?
Exactly. Basically, exactly. What wonderful games did you try to sneak into my room in the morning while I was still asleep and play?
Madden 07 was one of them.
Good times, though. Good times. Well, yep. Glad to have you with us. This is the first time we've done this with 3 people, I think. So
yeah,
we'll see if there's enough room for the 3 of us. So yeah, let's roll into 2023. If you guys want, just a casual. Let's not go too in depth here. We got a lot to talk about today, so let's try and keep it moving. But how did you guys feel about the year? Obviously, most people very positive on 2023. Do you share that sentiment? Is it an all-timer? How do you guys feel about it?
Crap year. Hated it. Just kidding. Just come and be super negative. No, I think the question, as is always asked, was this the best year in gaming? And I don't know about that, but it was a very good year. It was one of the better years in recent memory. There, to the point where I still haven't even played some of the really good games that came out. I haven't finished some of my favorite games. Like, I have games on my top 10 list that I am not even close to finishing just because there hasn't been enough time. So yeah, there's a couple disappointments. I think there's a few things we hoped to see this year that didn't come out, but hard to complain about how good this year was.
Yeah, same. I don't know what else to add, but it feels like one of the best years of gaming in recent recollection, and I worry for 2024 to try and compete with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I don't think it has a chance, to be honest. And I guess we can get into that a little bit at the very end. Mm-hmm. Our thoughts on 2024. But yeah, pretty boring consensus take. I mean, it's just this game it's been an inundation.
I know I want to be a
of
contrarian, but it was a pretty good year.
Unprecedented, some might
Yeah.
say.
absolute insanity. So yeah, for me too, and to speak a little bit to what you said, Zach, there's there's games that probably would have been in my top 10 or even top 5 this year that I
Yeah.
haven't played.
Yeah.
And so that's going to feel bad when we get to our list.
Totally.
In some ways, I mean, there's going to be some interesting rankings based on things any of us haven't been able to get to, just because there's not enough hours in the day when you factor in
Yeah.
life.
Should we maybe start
So
with like, because we each have our top 10 that we're going to go around and do. Should we maybe start with the maybe a couple of games that we didn't get a chance to play, or like any honorable mentions or anything like that? What do you think?
so let's do, well, you mentioned you wanted to do biggest disappointment. Clearly that's not
Right.
going to be in anyone's top 10. So let's do
That's a good point.
disappointment. And then I absolutely wanted to do honorable mentions if your list spilled out past
Yes,
10,
it
which I
did.
know mine did.
It absolutely
Because it
did.
was that 10 mark was brutal.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get into it, but yeah, I'd like to do some honorable mentions and shout outs, and each of us can take turns shouting out maybe the ones that didn't make the cut, and then if we multiple of us have played that game, we can talk a little bit about it without belaboring the point too much. But for disappointments, I'll let you guys go first, because I have not I haven't secured one in mind. So
Okay.
what was your biggest disappointment or notable disappointments for
I,
games in 2023?
I'm super excited to hear Calvin's, but Calvin, I can go first if you want me to.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I'll
Okay.
sit on mine a little
Okay.
longer.
We'll save Calvin's because I feel like there's a lot of interesting stuff there. My most disappointing game of the year was Diablo 4. Now, disappointing doesn't mean the game was bad, that I hated it, that I didn't enjoy it. None of those things. It just means that based on my expectations, it didn't quite live up to it. So for me, I was really excited about Diablo for a couple of reasons. I hadn't played much of Diablo 2 or 3, so I don't have a ton of history with the franchise. This felt like a good point to jump in. There's obviously a ton of hype around Diablo, and it's from Blizzard, so it's one of the big developers. It's kind of set in, I don't, it's not the same universe as World of Warcraft, but it's kind of their same style and some of the same conventions and like types of gameplay mechanics are shared. And Levi and I and Calvin, I think you played. I don't know if you played a little bit of World of Warcraft, but Levi and I played a lot of that in our day. Um, so
Yeah, I played a little bit, but not much. I'm actually looking forward to maybe getting into it now. But
okay, yeah, you had more of a life back then, and you're looking to change that for the worse.
Step
Um,
down.
yeah. So anyway, it was pretty excited about it, and just everything about it looked cool. The gameplay looked interesting. The visuals were really cool. It felt like a very unique game that would capture some of the just some of the essence of what we loved about World of Warcraft back in the day, and it might bring that into modern day as something we could play. And I think the reason I was disappointed is just that it didn't really sustain itself in terms of like interest and fun to play. Like it was fun, it was cool, but 15 plus hours into it, I found myself just not quite as interested. And part of this is the problem of so many good games came out this year that as other games came out, I wanted to play those more, even though I was enjoying Diablo. And then the secondary reason it was disappointing is, Blizzard started to do that thing where they start nerfing things because they're trying to keep you playing day in and day out forever instead of just letting you play a fun game. And so some of the earlier, like maybe wacky, overpowered aspects of various classes and things you could do started to get nerfed, and then made the game just more bland, and it made it more tedious. So kind of the Destiny problem where it's like all of a sudden you're doing these tedious things trying to hit those high points in the game, and I'm just sick of that like live service chasing the carrot for only occasional. I need dopamine constantly, so you can't stretch it out that far. So anyway, that was my most disappointing.
Yeah. Yeah, I could definitely see that. I actually remember, it's hard to think, sometimes it's hard to think back to before a game launches after the
Mm-hmm.
fact, because perception and actually getting your hands on it changed things so much. Um, but I do remember having that feeling of like, man, what if they could bring, I've thought about what if they could bring WoW to console for,
Yeah,
I've thought that for 10
yeah,
years, and I don't know why they haven't yet, to be honest with you. So it kind of felt like, hey, maybe this could be it. But yeah, at the end of the day, I too am so burnt out on live service, and I don't know if we'll touch on it at all. Maybe if we talk at the end, if we want to wrap up thoughts. But watching Sony this year, Um, kind of, man, it's been quite a story of Sony with their push for live service, and this year it's all kind of culminated, and maybe they're taking a step back from that. I think a lot of people are just tired of it, and
Mm-hmm.
like you mentioned, the nerfs every day, every week. It's like,
Yeah.
what is this, a job? I come in
Oh,
here to
this fun
play
thing.
a game.
Yeah. Take that down.
I work hard playing to get
Yeah.
this thing, and I make this build, and then
Yeah.
the next day you nerf it to the ground, and it's like, all right, well, this is not fun anymore. So
They're like, we need to
live
nerf fireballs
services,
to make them more equitable for everyone. It's like, well, that's not fun.
yeah, live services that try to cater to the everyday streamer just don't work. I've really come around to the point where if I'm only going to play a multiplayer game or a co-op game, if it's just a game that they're catering towards grabbing some friends and having a good time,
Yeah.
and they're not taking it too seriously. So
Yeah.
I could
Like
see
the good
that.
old
All right.
days.
Yeah, like the good old when you would get together in a room in a
And
physical.
back right when we had LAN parties and candy bars cost a nickel.
Yep, the good old days. All right, Cal. I'm still looking, so tell me what your biggest disappointment was.
All right. Well, I'll start off very similar to what Zach said. Just because I listed this as my biggest disappointment, by no means does that mean I disliked the game or that it's a bad game in any way. Yeah, I just feel like that needs to be said first.
What is this game?
I'm so
It's
excited.
also not a game from this year, so that is one thing.
Okay,
But
I feel like I might know what it is. But
yeah, so I feel like it's one of the most dangerous things I'm about to say.
yeah,
But,
I'm pretty sure I know what game you're gonna say.
But I think my biggest disappointment of the year was Bloodborne.
I knew it. I knew it.
What? Wow, I didn't see that coming from you, honestly.
Oh
I
my
mean, I
God.
knew that you weren't as high as Zach, but
Everybody get
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, it's a scary.
our 5 subscribers.
If there was more listeners, I would be. I don't know if I would have said that.
Yeah, no,
That's
no, it's
funny.
good.
Okay, so all right, try and wrap up why it's your biggest disappointment then. Convince
Well,
me.
one of the reasons is that when I went through a lot of my other games, I couldn't really frame any other games as a disappointment, and a lot of that comes to expectations. And a lot of the games I played this year, I didn't have, or they were kind of surprise games for me. I didn't really have set expectations ahead of time, and so they didn't have much room to disappoint. Whereas Bloodborne specifically, couple things to know. It's the latest FromSoft Souls-like that I've played. I played most of the main titles before it, so I played Sekiro, Dark Souls 3, Elden Ring, all before Bloodborne.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, a lot of the improvements, just quality of life, things that they did in those games, I noticed the lack of. But also, there's key things that I really value highly when it comes to a good Souls game. And those really come down to area variety, level design, all that.
Mm-hmm.
And then either a balance between combat and the bosses specifically. And Bloodborne, compared to some of the other titles, really just was a bit lackluster to me. Very much in the area variety and the bosses.
I could see that.
Which for me, that holds a lot of weight. And
I could definitely see that in the area variety.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, if I look back, I haven't played that game in years. I think of two main areas. I mean, you've got the city at large, which is broken down into districts, but feels very similar. And then you've got kind of that forest swamp area.
And there's a few others that are smaller. Like there's a castle in the snowy area that you go up on top of. Did you play the DLC, the Old Hunters?
Yes. Yeah. And I will say, honestly, I it wouldn't be like drastically lower by any means, but my opinion on the game would be even just a little bit lower if not for the DLC, because the DLC is the best some of the best content.
I agree. I agree with that. I could see that.
But
like even
me, I still have it to play.
Yeah, you're gonna, dude. It's the DLC is so good.
It's very good.
I think
all
that's
negative
fair.
things.
Like having played some of the other, because I had a similar journey. Bloodborne, I played Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring before Bloodborne, and I think both of those have more area variety. Elden Ring certainly, and I think Dark Souls 3 as well. Um, I could see that, and same with some of the boss stuff. And I think compared to something like Sekiro, like the combat isn't as finely tuned. Although, maybe later we'll talk more about Bloodborne. No spoilers of what's on my list, but so I'll save some of those comments. But I could definitely see where you're coming from in terms of it not living up to expectations you had based on things you really liked about some of the other Souls games you'd played prior.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I think it largely comes down to the order you played them in. I think if you had played Bloodborne before Dark Souls 3, Sekiro, um, that would change your opinion. And I know that maybe even
absolutely,
plays a role in it not being as high for me because I played it after Dark Souls 3,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is a better game in almost every way, other than the speed is kind of fun in Bloodborne. I like the regaining health mechanic and things like that. Um, so I get it. I mean, FromSoft have only gotten better with. Let's not get into the Elden Ring discussion, but like relatively speaking, they've gotten more polished as the years go on, as you would expect. And going back and playing Bloodborne this year, or as of now, you can see some of the dated feelings creeping through in the gameplay or the game design or things like that. So
Sure.
I
Yeah.
think that's
yeah,
fairly understandable.
yeah,
Hot
and
take.
so I do think that there are very key things that Bloodborne does exceptionally well and does better than any of the other games. But yeah, it just comes down to the area variety, and the bosses really felt lacking to me, and that's
Yeah.
that's so much to me. So that was a letdown overall.
Wow.
Okay.
Some hot
Well,
takes.
there
I
you
love
have
it.
it.
Right out the gate.
Calvin's going to be strung out on the streets
That's right.
the following week after this releases. All right, I've got mine. I've got
Okay.
um I've got a two-parter because I had one that I was
Mm.
going to use, but it was kind of like it's small fish to fry.
Okay.
Um,
That
so
works.
I'll start with the small fish. Last Case of Benedict Fox
Oh, right. Yeah.
was one I was really looking forward to. And what hurts even more is I picked it up in our fantasy league,
Yeah.
thinking, man, this game looks crisp. The art style, the everything just feels like it's really firing on all cylinders here. And man, that game came out to I believe it was a 67 on Open
Yeah.
Oof.
Critic.
It's rough because
I
it looked really
lost.
good.
I think I lost 6 points because it's two for every point below 70 or something. I
Mhm.
lost like 6 points because I picked it up. It
Yeah.
was brutal. I can't, it's not fair to me to bag on it too much. I haven't played it. I actually did purchase it. It was on sale on Steam this past week, so I'm gonna check it out. Um, but yeah, for that to come out and get below 70, I was really shocked because of the quality of the art and just how good it looked in previews.
Yeah.
That
Yeah. It
was a
looks
major
great in
letdown.
previews.
Going into the year, it was one of my low key like favorite indies that I was looking forward to. So
Hmm.
the big one that popped into my head as I was looking through this list of games that released, I'm like, man, none of these were really a disappointment to me personally. Everything that came out that I cared about was good, or it got delayed, which is kind of a disappointment, but whatever. Um, Silk Song, man, what the
Oh,
heck?
okay. Yeah.
What
Disappointment in
the
that it
heck
was
are we
supposed to come
doing,
out.
Team
Yeah.
Cherry, man?
Different kind of disappointment.
Yeah.
This is the second year in a row I have picked
Wow.
Silk Song in our fantasy league because last year I was like, I think it could come out,
Yeah.
and then it didn't come out. And this year I'm like, okay, it's
It
coming
has to
out
come
this
out.
year. I'm gonna get a 96 on this thing. It's just
Yeah.
gonna blow the doors off everything.
Uh,
We have heard nothing.
I know.
Last we
It's
heard of it
wild.
was the Xbox showcase last year, and where they
In like June or
where they
something. Yeah.
implied that it would be out within the following, so this past summer, and we missed
Right.
that date.
Yeah.
Team
That was the
Cherry,
2022 Xbox
exactly.
showcase. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
2023
Wow.
summer was the end of that year.
Right. And here we
Haven't
are.
hadn't heard anything, and Team Cherry just kind of, I think they released a tweet or something in the summer saying, we're going to continue to take our time and work on it, and that's the last we've heard of it. And so now,
Hmm.
I mean, going into 2024, I don't know how to even have confidence it's coming
Are
out
you
this
gonna
year.
pick it up again? Yeah.
I feel like I
yikes!
have to. I feel like I have to, but
You're
like I
invested at
really
this
don't.
point.
I don't have
Surely.
confidence that surely it'll come out this year, but will it? I feel like I could be sitting here, December, January, 2025, and it's still not out. So I don't know what's going on. I'm a little bit worried. There was that whole scare with the engine that they were using. what's the engine that tried to retroactively charge people for downloads?
Oh gosh, yeah. I'm forgetting
I don't
off
know
the
why
top
I
of my
can't
head.
think of it, but it's the engine that
Unity? Was it
Hollow Knight's
Unity?
built on. I think it might be Unity.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going to happen there. Major disappointment. I mean, I thought we were getting
Yeah.
Hollow Knight Silksong in 2024. So the
You know
fact
what?
that, I mean, if you had told me,
Yeah, I'm more disappointed by that than I was by Diablo. Yeah, good pick.
yeah, if you'd have told me that in January this past year, I would have been
Yeah.
heartbroken, as I was the whole year waiting for news. So
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, Hollow Knight, I think, is one of our all three of us, one of our all-time favorite games, and for it
yeah,
to
it's one of the
continue to be
greatest games ever
delayed is
made.
just continually disappointing.
Yep.
Yep. All right. Good to start off with some disappointing to really
I like to start the day
really
with
bring
some
a
Can only
conversation
go
negativity.
down.
up.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let me
Exactly.
pull up my list here.
What order do we want?
Um,
Because I'm thinking we go round robin. Like, who do we want to?
well, we're gonna do notable mentions, right?
Right. Yes. Honorable mentions. So who do we want to start with? We can kind of go around in circles.
Um, so I've got a handful. Does anyone have less, or does everyone kind of have a handful they want to shout out?
I
I have
I
two or three.
probably have less than you guys. I think I've probably have a smaller pool of games in general.
Okay.
So
Well,
I have
let's start.
less.
Let's start with you, Cal, and let's try not to take like too long with
Yeah.
these because we still have our top 10, which is going to be probably more like 20 games, 25 games because we all have different games.
Right.
So what were some that didn't quite make the cut for you, Cal?
Again, smaller pool, so maybe smaller fish that I'm working with. But one of my biggest notable mentions that just couldn't make the top 10 was one that we just played very recently, Heavenly Bodies. Um, very small game, short game, co-op,
Didn't make your top 10?
optionally. No, it didn't. But
Oof,
very good.
Ooh.
spicy.
Excellent
That's
game.
my game of the year.
Um, um,
Spoilers.
yeah,
Okay, well
it's just
don't go into that one too much because I do have it on my list.
okay. All right.
I
Yeah,
couldn't keep it off
I'll
my
leave it
list,
at
man.
that. It's
Yeah,
it's very good, and I enjoyed it a lot.
I can't
yeah.
wait to
I'll
hear
leave
more
it at
about
I
it
that
would
because
until we
I
agree.
talk about it
actually,
more.
yeah, I actually don't know much about that game, so I'm excited
Yeah,
to hear.
Yeah, I
hear
figure it's probably not super well known.
Yeah, I've
No, I
heard the
don't think
name,
so.
but
It's a
I
smaller
don't know
game.
anything else
Yeah.
about it. Yeah. Cool. Is
Anything
But
that
else?
your
yeah,
only? Is that it?
that's one of my biggest honorable mentions that like didn't make the cut. Another one that just didn't quite cut it. That I also really enjoyed was Tribes of Midgard. It wasn't a life changing game, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it was. I kind of went into it with mid to low expectations and had a
Right.
great time and really enjoyed it. My time playing it, so that would be my
Yeah,
other.
that's a great shout out. That's a great
Yeah,
shout out. We had a lot of fun. It was great. That game is awesome in co-op too. It's a very
yeah,
chill, top-down survival game, and it was really fun progressing and getting stronger and like ultimately fighting giant bosses together.
yeah. The art style as
Lot,
well
lot of lot of
was
fun.
just very pleasant and clean, and it was nice.
Yeah,
So
I think both those games you shouted out. Um, this year to me, I've kind of had a renewed appreciation, and I will be looking for more experiences like that because I think um, maybe in general or maybe just me, I've undervalued good co-op experiences, and I think I'm coming to a point where I enjoy a really good co-op experience as much, if not more, than a really good single player experience. So, um, two sides of the coin. But yeah, those are great shout
yeah,
outs.
it takes
Um,
two. I mean, that was an
yeah,
amazing game,
Yeah, that
just
was a
as good as
great
any.
co-op. Yeah,
some would say
Yeah.
game of the year.
some a couple of people might have said that. Yeah.
All right, Zach, what are your honorable
All right,
mentions for 2023?
I have three. First is Hogwarts Legacy. So this is an honorable mention. I think because my expectations were actually pretty low. I thought this was going to be a bad game, and it was pretty good. It looked beautiful. It ran great on PS5 for the most part. Um, and they did a really good job of giving you a really immersive setting. You got to explore the wizarding world in a way that I think a lot of fans of the franchise had always wanted, and I think they did a pretty good job. The gameplay was relatively fun. It wasn't life changing, and I had some qualms with it. In kind of later game, I got kind of bored and burnt out. But just for the quality of being in the world and exploring it and how immersive that felt, I thought it deserved a shout out.
Yeah,
Um, and I think Levi, you maybe
it
played
was way better than it had any right to be.
exactly. Yeah,
Like if
yeah,
that was
exactly.
your bag and you were into that IP, you could not have been given a better game really. When usually movie or different IP brought into video games are cash grab trash. So
Right. More often than not, they're pretty bad, and this one was pretty good. Another honorable mention is I played Jedi Fallen Order this year, which is the first. Not that didn't really get into the sequel much yet, but I beat it in anticipation of Jedi Survivor, and I actually really liked it. It's kind of clunky in its control, and the visual fidelity is not the best as you progress in the game, but it was really fun. It was a good Star Wars adventure, and I had a lot of fun with it. But it's not top 10 material, especially this year.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
that's
I
fair.
think
I
Yeah.
my stance on Fallen Order
I don't
is
think you'd give
well
it an
known between the three of you. So
yeah, I don't think
I,
you'd give it an
I
honorable mention.
I haven't played either of those games, either Hogwarts or Fallen Order, so I cannot weigh in on those as of now.
Yeah, well, there you go. Good. Fallen Order's I think good too because there's a lot of story preceding Survivor, so I think it's worth playing. I know there are some dissenting opinions on that, but I had fun with it. Um,
boo.
and then my final honorable mention is Sea of Stars, which is an indie game. It's kind of an isometric
How much of Sea
RPG.
of Stars did you play?
I think I'm at like 18 hours now. I've played a
Really?
decent amount. I actually really like it. It's not quite like top 10 material, especially this year. For an indie game, though,
Are you actively playing it, or you played
Mhm.
about 18 hours and fell off?
I played like 5 hours and then got distracted with other stuff, and then I went back to it because I really do like it.
It's
Um,
on my gaming queue, like in my top five
okay,
or
cool.
six that I'm waiting to get to.
I think you'll like it because the world is really colorful and vibrant and
The
just
art style
fun
is
to be in.
beautiful.
The art style is beautiful. The characters are kind of are fun. It's very RPG, like kind of quirky, slightly larger than life characters, um, but really it's a mix between the exploration is pretty fun. Like you're not just walking around, like you're climbing and unlocking paths, and it's
Is there any
fairly
sort of platforming?
kind of. It's hard to describe without showing it. It's not like difficult platforming per se, but yeah, there's kind of like these weird isometric. You'll climb walls and then like jump across things and like have to find ways to
Can you
unlock
control
doors.
the
And
character, or
Mhm. Yeah,
like
you
you
can.
can fall off or fail at platforming?
I think you can like there's not really a failure state to the platforming, so that's where it's kind of like
Okay,
it is and it isn't. But it's
gotcha.
enjoyable because like the way you explore, like it's very interactive, and so it feels like you're climbing things and jumping over things. But there's not a ton of tension in the platforming because there's not
Gotcha.
really a failure state. But it's still fun, and the way it's kind of creatively laid out, it's just enjoyable to like progress through the various areas, and then the combat's pretty fun. So it's turn-based combat, but there are some extra flourishes they have where, if you hit like the A button right as your character's attacking, if you hit it at just the right time, you can get like critical damage or extra damage. Or if you hit A right as you're supposed to block, you can reduce the damage you were supposed to take. There are some special abilities where, for example, like one of the characters, she can like throw her weapon kind of like or she like shoots like a spinning crescent energy beam, and it bounces off an enemy. And if you keep hitting A as it comes back to you, you can like keep bouncing it off all the enemies, and it goes faster and faster. And so it's like
Oh, that's cool.
there are elements
Oh,
that
that is cool.
engage you. Yeah, so
Like
it's
little
turn
tiny
based.
mini games.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's like it's turn based, but there's like a real time kind of very dynamic component to the combat. And there's some other like levels to it as well of certain like energy types you can build up during combat and then use, and combos your characters can do together. So it's surprisingly fun. And I haven't beat it yet, but I think you'll like it, Levi. It's worth calling out.
Yeah, I mean it's I think it won indie game of the year at the Game
Yeah,
Awards
it's
this
it's
year.
pretty good.
Um, People very positive. I've heard some minor critiques of it, but overall the sentiment's very positive, and I don't have any like nostalgia for something like Chrono Trigger or whatever that a lot of people are pulling from. So I
Hmm.
know it's an older format, style for a game, which I tend to struggle to click with sometimes. Um, but the engaging elements of combat and the art style, I think, might be enough
Yeah,
to pull me through. So I'm hoping to get to it.
I think you'll like it. I think it has enough things that will draw you in.
Yeah, I hear it's long too, though. So these days, I'm like, every time I look at a long
I
game, I'm
know.
like, let me play this short game I don't care about that much.
I know, right?
You know, keep procrastinating.
Totally. I'm right there with you. All
All
right, what
right.
are
Well,
your
I've got
honorables?
bear with me. I'm gonna try and go quick. I've got a bunch of honorable mentions because I played a ton of smaller indie games this year that are just so good, but just can't make a top 10 in a year like this. So let me
Yep.
try and compile these. First of all, I want to say Tunic has some really cool ideas.
Yeah.
Um,
I
I
look forward to
found that
playing
for me
that.
personally, yeah, for me personally, I've found that I'm not as big of a fan of the older Zelda top-down Zelda kind of gameplay for some reason. I don't know why. I get a little bored with it. But Tunic does some really cool witness type things with puzzles in the game, especially in the later game. And if you enjoy that Zelda type of gameplay, then it's a bonus. And if you tolerate it, then it's worth kind of pushing through to get to the really cool puzzle stuff at the end. Very memorable. So Tunic, another really short one I played that, I mean, I kid you not, maybe 2 hours long, maybe. Elec Head. I know
Wow.
you played it,
Mm.
Calvin.
Yeah,
Um,
Leghead was very good.
really short, sweet, well made puzzle platformer. I mean, I think it's cheap. Go grab it. It's just a really great game to play for a day
Just
or two.
just a couple of hours, but pretty
Yeah.
good.
The next two are some indie Metroidvanias I played. So a lot of these have been Steam Deck, other than Tunic. Pronti is
Mm.
a really solid Metroidvania that is, its twist is you're swimming. Your character swims, and he doesn't actually do combat. You have like a swordfish companion that can shield you and do combat. It controls very, very differently than anything you've probably ever played. And just inherently being underwater changes the upgrades and the maneuvering and the way the Metroidvania plays out. It was very cool, very unique, cool Metroidvania worth playing.
I
The
have
other
that
one was Haiku.
on my Steam Deck ready to go.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's worth playing if you're a fan of Metroidvanias. So the other one that I would say the same thing for is Haiku the Robot.
Mm-hmm.
This one I actually have. I'm going in order too. I loosely ordered these from 20 to 10. Haiku the
Okay.
Robot
Gotcha.
um, is there's nothing special about it, but it is an incredibly solid imitation of Hollow Knight. Like it's just like we have Hollow Knight at home.
Yeah,
Someone
I
took their
remember.
stab at making Hollow Knight, and it's really good. Like there's nothing
Yeah,
bad about it. It doesn't stand out in any special way. It doesn't really do anything that creates its own twist, but it's just we're all waiting for more Hollow Knight, and it's
It's a
a
little bit of
solid
that.
8 out of 10. That.
Yeah.
yeah. I've played
Um,
a while back. I played, I think, like the first half an hour of that. Not much. I think I got
and
to
now
the
you
first
can play more.
boss, and it was very tight, controlled very well. I enjoyed it, but I haven't been able to get back to it. So
The
it's on
art
the list
style's
for sure.
cool. I love the character design. I mean, the little robot and everything. It's just a really cool robot Hollow Knight world. So great game. Another one I'm shocked didn't make my top 10, but Dredge. Just played this one recently.
Yeah, I played a
Um,
little bit of that.
thoroughly
I haven't gotten to
enjoyed
that
it.
one
It's
yet.
it's very much uh what's a coffee game, coffee book game. I don't know what you would
Coffee
call it, but
table.
it's like coffee table
Yeah.
game. I don't know. Um,
I hear you though. Yeah.
very very soothing, but also kind of tense and like it has
A little
horror elements,
yeah, it's a
but it's
little
also
creepy but
really
peaceful.
enjoyable and
Yeah.
It's
chill.
a
Yeah, it's a
it's a weird
weird mix of
combo.
things.
Yeah, it's
You
like
got some
HP
Tetris in there.
Lovecraft but relaxing, which doesn't make
How does
sense.
that work?
I don't know.
Exactly. So I thought the fishing mechanic was really cool.
Mm.
Um, the intrigue and the suspense and the mystery of the alien things that are happening, as well as the fear of being out on the lake at night and different things. Um, really cool. Not too long of an experience. Super worth playing. So highly recommend that one. The next two are really good platformers that I just like, solid platformers. And these were both Steam Deck. Blue Fire, I
Mm-hmm.
played on a trip earlier this year, and I likened it to Hollow Knight's traversal and platforming. It's very, very tight and precise, with like in like a dark Wind Waker art style, which sounds dope. Like
Yeah, that's a
you can't
cool
go wrong with that
premise.
combination. The
I,
combat's
I've
very mid. It's
I've
just
just
fine.
started that one.
Yeah, but the traversal is the real shining star here. Like it's fun enough that in the game there are um, levels that you can go into that are strictly platforming challenges, and they're really fun to do. And the platforming is such a focus that even the DLC has a level creator. So I dabbled with that a little bit too, playing some of the user made creations and stuff. The platforming is awesome. It's a really, and if you like the Wind Waker art style, which I don't know anyone who doesn't,
Right.
um, it's great for that. So the other one is an even more simplistic platformer. It's called Lunistis, and
Mm.
this one is just, it's a 10 out of 10 game for what it is. It's done in the style of like a PS2 graphic overhaul, but like modern. But it kind of looks like you're playing a PS2 game, and
I
it's
actually
kind of
love that.
like it reminds me. It basically makes me think if Sony had their own Mario in the PS2 days, this is what it would
Mm.
have been, because it's kind of got this Japanese flair to it a little bit. But literally, all it is, you go into a level, there's a timer, there's a certain number of collectible origami swans, and you're just trying to get through the level without dying. And you get ranks at the end. That's how it works. Like based on how quick you did it, how many deaths you had, how many of the swans you collected, and then if you do all the things, you can get like an extra item at the end. So it's about
Mm.
like, a completionist type thing,
Yeah.
and that's it. It's got maybe 12 levels, and it was just an absolute joy to sit down and play that game. It's really fast. It's weird when you first sit down and control it, you feel like you're just flying, and it's very sensitive with the joystick. But once you get into it, it just feels, it's so tight, and it just feels so good to. It's just an excellent platformer.
I'll have
So
to add that to my list. That's
yeah.
Yeah,
PlayStation 2 era platformers are my jam.
Oh yeah, and
that's another
it's pick
one.
up and play. You play it for
Yeah.
5 minutes, you put it down. Like it's
Yeah,
just one of
Yeah.
those that's so easy.
Yeah.
that's another one that I've played a little bit of. I just through your Steam Deck, I've tried that one out, and it's really tight, really fun. It is a little weird to get used to how quick everything moves, but it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I tried really hard to get it in my top 10, but I couldn't quite do it. So I got two more. Timesia. I'm surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it might
Mm.
be in your top 10. So should I not say much? Did it make it?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, I won't say much on that then. And then the last one is Madden 07, which I swear I almost put as my game of the year. Like, I bought a
Oh
Steam Deck
man,
in January, I think this past year. So I've had it for a year now. And I've logged more hours in Madden 07 than maybe any game this year. It is a timeless video game. It has
Imagine
nothing to
choosing
do with
Madden
nostalgia.
07 over
Could-
Tears of the
In
Kingdom and
2023,
just like everything that came out. That's
dude, the
amazing.
fact that I can sit down or lay
Yeah.
down in bed with a Steam Deck and
And
play
play
my
it. I know.
franchise in
I hear you.
Madden 07 is just, it's a thing of childhood. Um,
Totally. Yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
yeah.
No.
it's
So
funny.
No.
anyways,
It makes total sense. Yeah.
I completely understand it, but it's still hilarious.
Yeah.
I know, I was just like, well, maybe it has to be done. But no, I decided to keep it mostly, my list is mostly games that came out this year, because
Yeah.
that's mostly how I played games this year. I know yours will all be different. So thanks for tolerating my long rant there. There was a lot of just, it's hard when there's these small, really small experiences that are just
Right.
like
Super good.
perfect 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
But it's like when you have games like Tears of the Kingdom or Lies of
How do you
P,
even
or,
how do you
these
even
other
compare
games
them?
that I'm
Yeah.
sure, Baldur's Gate, it's really hard to weigh
Yeah.
them together. And all of it's kind of nonsense anyways. How do you compare Lunistis with Baldur's Gate? Like,
Right.
which one brings you
It's
more pure joy? Maybe Lunistis,
right.
but like, how
But
do
in
you say
terms
it's
of
a better
quantity
game?
of joy,
There
it's
you go.
it's an
So,
impossible argument. Yeah. I
Yeah.
get it.
so anyways, there is our honorable mentions. So I don't know. that still leaves so many games to wonder what are on our lists here. And I know
It
that you
does, yeah.
both, especially, have played games that did not come out this year. So this should be
Yeah.
very interesting.
I think
We're
Calvin
gonna
and I's
have
lists will be like a mix of slightly older games. I think when we
yeah,
talk older, I think we mean past
past couple of years.
5-6 years up until
Yeah.
present. So it's like modern-ish.
Ancient.
Yeah, right. I
Madden
played this
07.
thing called Mario, the original
Yeah.
Mario. Pretty good.
Well, I can
You
tell
heard
you
it?
guys right now, there's going to be a couple moments where you hate my list. So
I can't wait. I really want to get
I
back
know,
to
I
it.
know
So.
that
Uh,
there's going to be anger from Calvin probably twice. So
really? Wow. I feel
um,
like my most controversial thing is out of the way at this point. So
I
my
don't
my
know.
list
He's stopped sweating
probably
ever
won't.
since he doesn't have to talk about Bloodborne anymore. So
My
Yeah,
my my
that's
list
not
is
coming back
probably
up.
not as ridiculous as some others. So
Yeah,
okay, so who has the most obscure number 10? Raise your hand.
I don't.
Calvin?
I I might. It's hard to say. I
I
don't
know
know.
my number 10 is probably not on your list, so we can start with me.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into our top 10
Number
2023.
10.
Number
Add the echo
10.
effect.
Well, that reminds me of those Animal Planet. What was that
Yeah.
countdown? You know what I'm talking about? Man, we're old. Okay.
Oh, I think I do.
Yeah,
Number 10, like Deadliest
Yeah.
Animals or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
that's right.
Something
Yeah.
like that.
My number 10, and I'm gonna right out the gate, I'm gonna tell you guys from 6 to 10, I had the hardest time. 1 through 5, I feel pretty strong about that. 6 through 10, I really had a hard time and just kind of had to end
Actually,
here.
the
So
same. 6 through 10 is like a toss up, which is
why is
crazy.
6 through 10 so much harder? I guess because they don't make your top 5, so you're like they're all the same. I don't
They're
know.
not as clear decisions. I don't know.
Oh no, I mean 1 through 6. So never mind.
Oh,
Continue.
you're the opposite. Yeah,
I'm the
see,
opposite.
it got harder for me after 5.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know if this is 6 or 8.
Yeah.
10 for me is Cocoon, and it's kind of hard because I
Mm.
just played it, so I have this recency problem where I'm like,
Right.
at first when I was ranking, it was too high, and then it was out of the top 10. I'm like, no, it's definitely top 10. I'm having a hard time placing it, so we're gonna put it here. Cocoon.
Okay.
I don't think either of you've played it, right?
No, I
I've,
would
I've
like
started
to.
it.
It
I've started
is-
it. I've played
yeah.
like the first level or maybe through the first boss, but I have not gotten past that, so it clearly can't be part of my list for the year.
Yeah, it is a 10 out of 10 game for what it is. It's from
Awesome.
one of the creators of Limbo and Inside, which
Mhm.
you always have that. You're always wondering, like, were they actually behind it? Did they
Right.
actually
Were they-
bring the talent
Were
to
they
it?
Did they have the
creative one?
magic?
Yeah.
Right. And whatever this dude has, he's got it because I'm sure there's a lot of other people that worked on this, but this game is just fantastic. The biggest things I want to shout out are the visual design, the art design, and the audio design are just immaculate. Like, this game, if I were to rate this game as a strictly a puzzle game, I would say it's 8 out of 10. It's good. It's very good. It's founded on a stellar concept, which I think you all are familiar with, where you're like basically moving in and out of worlds. You
Mhm.
carry around these worlds. You can go into them. You can bring worlds into other worlds. So the premise is 11 out of 10.
Yeah.
Puzzles, I'd say 8 out of 10. Very good. Not too challenging. Some that were really cool to figure out. But the art design and the sound design, the way it feels to interact with the game, the feedback you receive, both, whether it's the controller or the sound, is just really what makes this game. I mean, it can take an 8 out of 10 puzzle game and make it feel like an 11 out of 10 as you play through it. So
Yeah.
that's what this game did so well. Every feedback that you get while playing the game,
Did you play it on
is just
PS5?
so good. Yeah, I played it on PS5.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything special about. There's no like haptic feedback, I don't think, but they just really. I think the sound design is probably the star of the show, and the concept is really cool. I hope that they can. I don't know. I don't know if they will make a sequel to this, because at the end of the game, I was wondering like how else would you expound upon this idea without vastly overcomplicating things.
Yeah.
But I will say the puzzle design. I kind of bagged on it earlier. It's done so well. Some of the game design elements that I noticed, because I start to think about this more as, I mean, I've always wanted to make a game, or we talk about games a lot. I really think about the design that goes into things. And so often in puzzle games, you'll see where they they didn't account for you doing this, or they didn't account for this, or they didn't make this is a little too obtuse. You might spend too much time over here wasting time that doesn't have anything to do with the puzzle. This game does such a good job of leading you along and closing off areas that are no longer part or relevant to the puzzle, and isolating you to the area where you need to figure something out. And that's so important for this game, when you can literally dive into multiple worlds and pull those worlds into other, like, think of the
Yeah.
complexity and the webs you could tangle.
Totally. Yeah.
They managed to keep the rails. It doesn't feel restrictive, but they made the rails for the puzzle design so well that at no point in this game where I could have envisioned a billion things going wrong did anything go wrong. Did anything get really obtuse, or did I get lost, or did I soft lock my game and have to reload something? Like, I was
Right.
really impressed that they managed to build this game as well as they did from start to finish. So
Yeah. That sounds hugely impressive, and I'm very excited for it. It's on my list of games I'd like to play. And so that's awesome.
yeah,
Super excited
Yeah.
it's
for
an
it.
eight to
I
10 hour game, another pretty small experience, and
Mhm.
it's one that's like, it's an experience worth having, because just the premise alone is something that's never really been done in a video game, and it's super cool.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
that is
like I said, I just started that one very recently, and just like an hour or two in, so it's one of my first games I've got lined up to start the
We'll see
year.
if it makes
Looking
your
forward
10
to it.
for
Yeah,
2024.
maybe.
All right, which one of you is going next?
Calvin, you want to go?
Sure. Um, I feel like this one might be a little bit of a surprise, but my number 10 is Fist, Forged
Okay.
in
Oh,
Shadow Torch.
okay. I think we've all played that.
I have not
I
yet.
f- Oh,
Oh, I
okay.
thought you
I,
did.
I wasn't sure if you had
I'm
yet,
aware
Zach.
of it, but I haven't had a chance to play it.
Yeah. So this is
Forged in
one that
Shadow Torch.
I had to remember because just with how many games came out this year, it had slightly been forgotten for me. But when I was going back through everything I played and looking back on, uh, some of my videos and remembering the game, it it was, I think it's aged well for me too, because
Yeah,
I really enjoyed it when I played it, but it wasn't maybe like a life changing or standout game too much. But as I've gotten further from it, I've
grow
really come to
fonder of it
appreciate
as
it.
it.
Yeah, more and more.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's just some of the best things about that game. The the world design and the ambiance, the music, all of that. Excellent. Very atmospheric, enjoyable to be in the world.
It's very Final
Um,
Fantasy VII esque,
Totally. Yeah, it
yeah,
feels a lot like
like
yeah,
diesel
Midgar.
punk.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
it feels
Midgar.
like
It
it
does
was
feel
made
very
with.
much like Midgard,
Yeah.
or Midgar. Midgar.
Which is
um,
very
Different
different
fantasy
from
city.
Midgard.
Yeah.
yeah. Um, and then the the traversal, the combat, few minor hangups on it, and but overall, by the end of the game, especially, very good, very fun, and I just thoroughly enjoyed that game. I don't know. I think it
Yeah,
really, the reasons it's aged so well, the further I get from it, is looking back on the world and the atmosphere. But um,
Hmm.
the the movement and the combat is also um, pretty good. Not the best I've seen, but it's very good.
Calvin, you are so perfectly centered. It's very impressive. Well done.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So symmetrical, man. You know
I
what? Your
tried.
statement though about looking back on it, your appreciation for it grows as time passes, and why? I think that's super true, and that's something I've noticed in recent years. You know how, like, um, in life, people are what matter. That's what you look back on, right? Feelings and people, connections with people. In games, it's not the mechanics or the combat or the, not even the story necessarily. It's more about like the times and place, or the feelings that the game gives you. And a lot of games for me that I like, Fist, that you look back on and you grow an appreciation for, usually have a moment or two of a real sense of place where it just like, and I think back to that area in whatever the city's called, where the dude's playing guitar.
Hmm.
It usually has to do with music too,
Yeah.
some sort of atmosphere that really just makes you feel like you're there. um So, anyways, just a random thought, but I've noticed that too.
And
It's like the music and the atmosphere. That's what like
Yeah.
ingratiates you to it over time. You don't look back and be like, oh, you know what, I did like that combat more than I thought. I mean, sometimes,
yeah,
but you know,
and that came into play a lot with me with figuring out how to rank a lot of my games and making my list, because I had to find a balance between like technicalities of a game, and this game technically might be better or worse than another game and perform better, it has better mechanics, whatever.
yeah,
But at the end of the day, my ranking comes down to how the game made me feel, the
yep,
impression it left, and like
right.
sometimes
And
that's
that's
not
what art's
technically the
supposed to
best
be.
game. Yeah,
Yeah.
That's what art is supposed to be. Yeah, and I totally agree. It's what the game means to you, and
Yeah.
it's hard to look at a list and
Yeah.
see through that sometimes because like we'll get there, we'll get there, but you know, there's some interesting things where I
because
really had to look at it and be like, how do I feel about this game? What does it mean to me? Not is it a really good game?
I had to make
and it
So
similar decisions. Yeah.
yeah,
there's games where you're like you look at it and you're like, logically this should be higher or
should be
lower,
better.
but this is where it is.
And I
Um,
put
Hmm.
Madden '07 at 1.
It's true. Yeah, I mean, I think that's all proof that video games is a form of art because
yeah,
of how complicated it is to try and pick these things.
Yeah,
It's how it makes
doesn't
you
matter what
feel,
it is on paper.
and it's
so
sort of like
subjective.
it's subjective. It's a greater than the sum of its parts thing where it's like, okay, well, this game was super immersive. Well, why? Like it might be music or it might be sound design or like haptic feedback. Like it can be all these weird things where, and that's why it's hard to break down why you think a game deserves number two or whatever. Cause it's like on paper saying this mechanic paired with this sound. It's not like it's just an equation where that plus that equals this feeling, but those are parts of it. So yeah,
Yeah,
it makes total
both
sense.
complex and pointless at the same time, and yet here we are.
Exactly. And that's why we talk about it so much.
All right, Zach, number 10.
All right, my number 10 is Super Mario Wonder,
Ah,
the
okay.
newest Super Mario game. Yeah, this one's interesting. I didn't expect to care
I
much
actually
about
thought it
this
would be a
game.
little higher on your list
Yeah, I actually really liked it.
of the 10, huh?
2D Mario games are not like my favorite thing ever. Have some nostalgia for them. Obviously, played those growing up, but I haven't cared about a 2D Mario game, and I don't know how long. Like I played one that was on the Switch a while ago, and I played the one on the Wii U or whatever, and they were fine. I never finished them. Played a little bit and kind of got bored. Is usually what happens. And Super Mario Wonder just kind of captured me, and it was, there's some really interesting mechanics that make it feel more creative and a little bit over the top, but in a way that was like really just really enjoyable to play. The world is like semi 3D and you kind of explore it and then you go into the like individual levels, and then the wonder mechanics change up how those levels are perceived and experienced in a way that I thought was pretty fun. Um, and yeah, but like I put it on my list because before I knew it, like I just kept playing it to the point where I completed it. Like I did everything. I unlocked every achievement. It just kept me
Wow.
coming back and playing it, and I had a lot of fun. And it's kudos to them. Like it's not my favorite Mario game of all time, but it's really really good. And again, usually I just prefer the 3D Mario games, and this one was a blast. It was a lot of fun. So I don't have a ton to say about it. It's 10 on my list for that reason. Like there's a lot of things that mean a lot more to me, but this was just pure childish fun.
Well, I'm glad it
Sometimes
came
that's all
up
you need.
because I'm a bad person for not mentioning it at all. But I've played maybe I'm closing in on half of it, and it's been a joy. Like you, I think like a lot of people, I think 2D
Yeah.
Mario just kind of has its limits in this day and age, and it doesn't
Hmm.
hit the same as it did 20 years ago. So
Yeah. And this one
um,
kind of did. That's why I put it on the
this
list. I was
one
like, yeah,
this one was impressive. I will say I've been playing it co-op with my wife, and there's a couple annoyances in co-op.
yeah,
Honestly, like overall, I think it's fun. There's a few things where it's just like, man, that's kind of annoying that that's the way that's designed for co-op or whatever. I do
yeah.
wonder if I had played this on my own, and I probably would have gotten through the whole thing if it would have made my list. Um, but it's one that I've finished half of it, and there's a few annoyances with co-op, so I just kind of was like, I don't know where to land on this one. It's a
I
lot of
most
fun when it's
I
firing
mostly
on
played
all
it.
cylinders. It's a
Yeah.
blast, and in
Yeah.
in playing it solo, you don't have to deal with some of those annoyances, and I bet you can just enjoy it even more
Yeah.
so.
Well, because I played a little bit with my wife, but mostly on my own. And I think the co op is nice for kids who want to play. Like, I think there's a place for it, but is a grown man sitting alone playing video games. I liked the solo experience because some of those later courses were actually pretty challenging. Like there was a few courses in this game that were pretty challenging, and trying to get through those with some, like, especially if you're not on the same skill level, even if you are, like some of them, you're trying to like do these very precise like platforming mechanics that would be, it would just be really hard to do that together, like for some of
Yeah.
these levels. But if
Yeah,
you're
there was a
alone,
level or two where we would go back to single player and she would watch me or we'd take turns
yeah.
because it was just too frustrating to try and get two people through it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of a bummer. It's like, man, it's cool that they implemented co-op and it does work kind of well, but it's weird that the game seems better solo. So I do intend to finish it at some point this year because it's too much fun and it's too whimsical and wonderful to not finish it. I really was enjoying it.
You
Seeing what
should.
each
It's
level
fun.
is going to do is half the fun. So
And some of those later
Interesting.
levels are pretty tough, and it's a fun challenge.
I
okay.
I don't even have the game, so I haven't played it. But it, and I have nothing against the game at all. But it just wasn't particularly on my radar. Didn't really have much intention of getting to it, but
I
I
didn't
think
either.
I think maybe
Yeah.
I'll throw it on the list now because sounds like a good time.
Yeah, I picked it.
Yeah,
I wasn't
it is.
planning
It's
to
a good
play it.
time.
I picked it up on a whim and started playing it, and that was like 2 weeks of my life.
I think they've hit it out of the park for what a 2D Mario can be. I don't know how else you improve the formula in 2024. Like
yeah, I don't
you
know.
know, and Nintendo
Impressive.
will try. They seem to do a really good job with their first party stuff. So I look forward to seeing kind of what they do next. All right,
Number
number
nine.
9. Mine is gonna maybe anger Calvin, so we can do mine later. We can do it now.
I'm curious at this.
Let's
You want to start with it?
do it.
All right. Okay.
Sure.
Okay. All right. At number 9, I put Hades. So
Really?
I wonder how high Hades is. For
I
Calvin.
actually
I know he's really
I actually
talked
was
it up.
I kind of thought I thought Hades fell last year for you. I didn't know you technically played
No,
it this year.
it was on the bubble, and I don't think I ranked it last year.
Okay.
It was my kind
Number
of my
9,
first. It was
really?
like 60% at the beginning of
I
2023. So,
I am
um,
I'm surprised by that. I'm shocked.
yeah, I mean, I guess you could tell us where yours is. Is that how we're doing this? If it's on your
We
list,
can, or you
let's
can. You can
wait.
wait.
Let's
You can
wait.
or you can
yeah.
wait. You can wait.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, let's wait.
but let's talk. But we'll talk about.
You can
it
talk
more.
about
I
what
don't
you
know how
like
you're
about
gonna
it,
do
though.
Yeah.
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 Or do we want
I'll
to
get
wait
more.
until it's the highest person on someone's list? Maybe we should do it that way.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, let's do
Okay,
that, and
so
then you
mine
can
is
talk about
Hades.
what
Let's
the
move on.
disparity. Okay,
All right.
cool.
There you
Hades.
go.
So
I
put a pin in that.
I'm very curious to hear our differing thoughts on that because that is interesting.
Okay,
Yeah,
so Calvin.
I didn't expect that.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing over here.
You're wrong, and you should feel bad.
I do usually.
Am I going next?
Yeah, go ahead.
You guys can
All
fight
right,
to the death to see who goes next.
My number 9 is Timesia.
Nice.
All right, we get to talk about Timesia.
Yeah, so
right.
you still haven't played that, right, Zach?
I played like an hour of it, and
Okay.
I was enjoying it. I plan to
Yeah.
continue. It was good.
Yeah. And then obviously I know you've played it, Levi, so we can maybe touch on a few things, but it was one of the biggest surprise games for me of the year for sure. Because I wasn't aware of it, and
Right, and to be clear, I think it came out a year or two ago.
It
but
wasn't this year. I had seen like a couple different YouTube videos kind of touching on it, so I was aware of it, but it didn't mean anything to me, and we just picked it up one night and started playing it, and played it all the way through to its end, and loved pretty much every minute of it, and it was excellent.
Yeah, I mean, I can chime in if you want.
Oh yeah, sure.
First of all, I got to start out by saying Timesia is at a 69. Not very nice on Open.
That's
Critic.
criminal. Like for
And
the
that
hour I
is-
played, that's way too. Like, that should be. It should be.
angers me and Calvin.
Yeah,
It should be 80 at
I
least. I think. Yeah.
I don't usually get like really invested over the scores games get, but I was after playing Timesia, I was legitimately upset and angry that like it got that low of a score because it does not deserve it at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Developed by Overborder Studio, published by Team 17, and they got gypped. They got straight
Yeah,
gypped
no,
because
yeah,
this is a game that I was like, oh, hey, that looks kind of cool a while back, years ago. And then I saw kind of it got really lackluster, kind of negative reception. And I didn't play it for years. And I think it was free on some sort of PlayStation service, is why we. The other cool thing about Timesia for us is that I visited and we picked like a day or two, or maybe you visited, and we played it in tandem. So it wasn't co-op, but like we both played the game side by side and kind of progressed through it
That's
at the
cool. Yeah.
exact same time. And
yeah.
it's a short game. It took us maybe 3 days, a long weekend to finish it. And so that was really cool, kind of adding in that tangential
Hmm.
experience at the exact same
Hmm.
time. But man, I can't believe how shafted they got when it came to reviews, because
I
this is it's a small experience. Um, my biggest disappointment was I wish there was another world. One
yeah,
more world would have been like awesome. Two would have been like, this is a phenomenal game.
yeah,
It's short. It is a little
and
short.
I think the only other real room for if any reason why it got as low as it did is because it's a double A game. Like it's very much double A. It's not a
I
triple A
honestly can't.
experience,
Yeah, I don't know.
but it's a very polished double A game. And I
Yeah.
That's my
think
thing, is
that's
that when you say double A, the only thing I can point to with this game that says double A is the scope. They didn't
yeah,
have the funding or the backing
yeah,
to make the scope as large as you would hope or expect for a triple A game, or something with a little more
yeah,
backing. That's the only area to me where I see anything, because the combat
and
The
and the
combat
art
felt
style,
very polished.
the
Yeah.
it
combat is
is.
I mean, literally. And I think one of the biggest problems actually that this game had, and that a lot of games have had, is that it's ironic because Sekiro won Game of the Year in 2019, and everything still gets compared to Bloodborne all the freaking time,
Yeah,
man. It's
yeah,
always
Mm.
Bloodborne. We'll even talk about it with Lies of P later. Like, everyone wants to compare everything to Bloodborne, and Sekiro, I guess just not enough people played it, even though it won Game of the Year. I know 2019 was
Yeah,
a
I feel like
lesser year in games, but
it's
um,
underrated. Like at large, I feel like not as many people have gotten
yeah,
into it, and it's a shame because
I think people were like scholarly, like, yes, that's a good game, but like they're like, I don't want to play it, and I don't know. But anyways, this game is a Sekiro like. It's not a Bloodborne like, and I've
yeah,
even
which I
yeah.
watched
loved.
reviews where they compare it to Bloodborne, and I'm just like, you're
Yeah.
playing it wrong. You're comparing the wrong game. It expertly mimics Sekiro. The timing is tight.
While
It feels good. There were
Hmm.
almost no deaths in this game where I felt like it was BS.
Yeah.
Everything
yeah,
was
it
tight and precise. It even adds its own mechanic too. It doesn't just rest on its laurels. It has a new
Hmm.
mechanic where your weapon, your physical weapon, or I forget how it works. Your physical weapon will take down like their shield, and then
mhm.
there's a green bar underneath it that you have to actually do damage with a different, your like secondary ability. Otherwise, the shield will regenerate. And
Yeah,
so it
it's
has
like
this
taking
interesting mechanic.
inflicting wounds and
Hmm.
Yeah, and then it
yeah,
adds stuff where you can literally you can get like um these weapons, manifest these weapons, and you can collect them from enemies and steal them from enemies. Like, it has
yeah. You
new
can
elements
steal
that it's
them
bringing
in mid
into it.
combat from the enemy.
Yeah, but just a joy to play. Like, honestly, this game, the art
Um,
style is fantastic. It's one of the only Souls like games I've ever played where I tolerated the mission um structure. It's done in
Format.
missions rather than like an open world, and I hate that. I've had a hard time with Neo, some of the other games that do that, and this one, I don't know why, but it does it really well. It's such a bite-sized double A but perfectly polished game, and it deserved more credit. The boss fights, I think we loved
Boss
every
fights
single
are
boss fight. Like, they were
yeah.
incredible.
I don't know if I could think of a boss fight from the game that I was really let down with, and
Yeah.
most of them were exceptional in my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm glad I made your top 10, because I wanted, maybe it should be in my top 10. Like I said, 6 through 10 was a cluster for me. So, but this game, if you like Souls games, if you like Sekiro, this is a must play game.
And
Um, Go ahead.
before we played this before Lies of P came out, and before Lies of P, this was the first game that gave me any sort of thought or hope that any developer non FromSoft could
Yeah,
create
totally.
a quality Souls-like game that I enjoy, and
Yeah.
they did that very successfully.
Although I'm worried based on reception that they'll never get another chance, but
I know, and that it's
we'll
so
see.
frustrating because it's such a good game. It didn't
Yeah.
deserve.
But
What
if
it
I were
got.
making a list for someone who liked FromSoft games, of games not made by FromSoft that you should play, this would be in my top 3. So
Absolutely,
very good.
Awesome. All right, so that was that your number 10 or your number 9?
it's
9.
number 9.
Number 9. Okay. And Levi, did you do your? Well, I'll cut this
Hades.
out. Hades, that's right. Okay. So my number 9.
Can't believe that.
Stop saying you'll cut stuff out that we'll never cut out.
Oh, dang it. You're right. No,
I'll
that's
cut that
going to be
out.
in there. Okay. My number 9. So honestly, 1 through 9 on my list is kind of crazy because there are things at like 7, 8, 9.
1 through 9, the whole
in a
list.
normal, basically in a
But
normal
10
year,
is normal.
in
10
a normal
is secure.
10 is secure in its place, but in a normal year, 7, 8, or 9 could have been in like the top 3 or top 5. It's like
I know.
Yeah.
because
Okay.
not only
See
was
that
it a
every
crazy
year,
year,
but yeah, it's
some
true.
of the games I played this year are like
Plus,
some of the best
with
games.
you especially last year and this year have played some phenomenal games that did not
I
come out
have.
this year. So that makes it.
I
so
caught
much
up a
better.
lot this year. So keeping that in mind, number 9 for me is God of War Ragnarok.
Oh, you
just-
played that this year.
Oh, that's crazy! You played that
Yeah.
this year.
Interesting.
I think I started it at the very end of the previous year, but almost all of
Okay.
it I played in January.
Okay,
Wow,
because
you know
I
what's funny?
finished. I think I
That's
finished mine
crazy.
in like December.
Like, not only would God of War Ragnarok not rank probably in your top 10 games of all time because of that, it's 9 in 1 year.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
That
And I
is
liked it a
crazy.
lot. When I thought of most disappointing games, like Ragnarok wasn't disappointing, but it very much met my expectations in the
Yeah.
sense that it was a sequel to the 2018 God of War. It was very good. It didn't go above and impress me really in any ways. There's a little bit new mechanics. I liked the story. I was a tiny bit underwhelmed by some of the story things and some of the battles at the very end. Overall, though, it was a blast, and I honestly I really loved every minute of it. I platinumed it, so it was really good, and that's just a testament to what this year was for me. So I don't have a ton more to say on it. Everybody
Is it
knows
a testament to fatigue of the gameplay?
formula?
What do you think fatigued you the most? Because I've always said it's a 10 out of 10 game, but it's just it's part 2. We got part 1 and then we got part 2. So to me they're like one game. And so the hype and the excitement and the newness was back in 2018 and it wasn't there in 2023. It was just the culmination and the finale of what started in 2018.
which I'm fine with because having a culmination has its own hype to an extent, and like that can be really satisfying. I think there is 2 problems with it. In video game world, waiting on part 2 is a problem because you kind of get behind. And so when 2018 God of War came out, it felt like this is current gaming. This is crazy.
Quickly.
Yeah, and by the time 2021, 2022 rolled around, dated is maybe a strong word, but you could feel its age a little bit. It wasn't quite, it's not peak of what's going on
Cutting
in gaming
edge.
right now. And for something as prestige video game as God of War, you feel it a little bit. So I think that's part of it is just, it takes so long to make a video game that you inevitably are going to get a little bit behind in that sense. And so you have to find other ways, I think, to compensate for that. And I don't feel like they did a ton that went above and beyond. It just felt like more. And that was still good. I think the other issue is just that to make a really satisfying part 2 is like you really need to deliver on some of those story and emotional beats. And I think they mostly did. But to be completely honest, I feel like the emotional punch at the end was not as strong as I was expecting it to be. It was good. The relationship between Kratos and his son was very well explored. And honestly, that was like a good through line for the game. But kind of by the end, it just felt a little bit anticlimactic in terms of like the narrative and some of the story beats. And then also how that played out, like the final battle with Thor and Odin was a bit of a letdown. Like the arena you fought them in was just like a muddy yard. It was like,
oh snap, you're right. I forgot that was the final battle.
The final battle, it was like the arena was not super impressive.
It's in the same yard that you fight Gallarhorn dude.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whatever his name is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, whenever you repeat an arena for a final
you
boss,
fight
no-go.
You fight Thor in that same arena right outside the house, and then the floor breaks out, and you fight Odin underneath.
And it changes a little,
I ever
but
fully grasped that. That is That is a
Heimdall is his
fundamentally
name.
disappointing final
Heimdall.
boss.
Yes, thank you.
Heimdall. Yeah.
And it changed when you fight Odin. I think it changes just a little bit, but it's not enough that it feels super different. And it wasn't super interesting. Like the layout of the battlefield was not particularly engaging or interesting. And then also the mechanics. Like Thor was built up to be this terrifying presence throughout the game where you're like, man, he might be the one person who could crush Kratos' head like a grape.
And
And then when
to
you
be
fight
fair, I
him,
think the beginning, the original fight at the beginning of the game, I think
that's true.
delivers
Yeah.
on that intimidation. But
And which is true. And this is
Yeah.
why these are nitpicks. This is an incredible
Yeah.
game, but
Yeah.
I still feel like that fight should have been really hard. Like
yeah,
that should have been a challenge. Like, this, because God of War has some really challenging fights, and I felt like Thor wasn't that hard. And I'm not saying like I'm this great gamer. It just felt like Thor was not that hard. And then Odin, like just the fight wasn't super interesting to me. So I think it was those
It was
elements.
very forgettable. I
Yeah.
honestly had a hard time remembering what the final fight was in Ragnarok. So I think that as time goes on, the combination of 2018 and Ragnarok will be looked on more and more fondly.
Yeah.
As we get some distance from it, and they can be packaged together as one like cohesive
And
story.
that's
Totally.
how I like to view it for my own reflection and ranking.
They're very much one game.
I prefer to combine them into one experience, and I look back on that experience rather than having to bicker on which one was better between the two. But
Yeah.
So
For sure.
yeah.
I guess to answer your original question before we move on, the dated aspect of the gameplay is not really what holds it back that much for me, because I was kind of expecting that piece of it. It was the narrative conclusion was not as much of an emotional satisfaction as I'd quite hoped for, and some of the final boss fights were just not super memorable or difficult, and I feel like that could have been better. But overall, still great.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think I would agree on pretty much everything you said. And I had very few disappointments with the game. I think what you listed are some of the biggest ones. I think it just comes down to the fact that if we, it's not possible, but if we somehow had the same game, but it was brand new and fresh, and it was the same freshness that 2018 had, it would be the best game ever. But it's just the fact
could have
that
released the whole thing complete in 2018
as one,
right?
Yeah,
which you can't,
mind-blowing,
you can't always do that.
and
so
it's just
fine,
it's
but,
just the inherent thing with sequels is it's nearly impossible when you have such a good starting game. It's nearly impossible
Totally.
to match or exceed that the second time
Right.
around.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I'm very glad it exists.
Oh,
I think
yeah,
sometimes we're like,
absolutely.
is
I
it worth
loved it.
doing a sequel? I'm glad they did it. Like it needed part.
It was an
2,
excellent
so-
game.
It
Yeah.
needed to be finished. Yeah. Okay, number
right.
8. We can do mine first because it's going to be the most enraging one of all.
Oh man.
And
could
we
it
won't
be?
talk about it till we get to your guys' number 1 because it's Baldur's Gate 3.
Well, you haven't even finished the game, so
Yeah, I think not having finished it, that's fair.
Act 2, I got through Act 2.
that's true.
But yeah, that certainly weighs into it. I'm a little distanced from it, and I took a pause at Act 2 because I was playing it very methodically, and I was like, "Oof!" You finish an act, and it feels like you finished a game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not
anyways.
expecting that. Like, if you had finished the game, it would be your number one. Like,
It
just
might jump
automatically.
up, and we'll talk about it more. But
I
really
do
just,
think
it's just that what I value in video games is either co-op shenanigans or incredibly what a video game can do to me that's special is incredible immersion. And Baldur's Gate 3 offers that, but in a very cerebral, reading a book, playing a table board game kind of way, which is it's draining. It's tiring.
It is tiring. I agree with that.
It's not rejuvenating.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I kept being like, did I enjoy this game more than this? And it just kept falling for me. So we'll talk about it more at 1. We don't have to get into it too much right now.
And it's higher on my list as well. So
or not 1. I don't mean to presume, but like pretty high for you guys, I'm sure. So
we'll see.
What are your numbers?
It's higher for me, I'll say that.
Yeah.
I can go next. So my number 8 was Spider-Man 2. Was that on anyone else's list?
it is actually also my number 8.
What? Sounds
Whoa,
like the right place.
you guys are
We're so alike.
cohesive. I didn't. So that's one of
You
my
haven't played it
biggest.
yet, right?
We didn't do a category of like your biggest wish I got to it game of the year, but
Yeah,
mine would
Levi
probably
hasn't
be
gotten to play it
Spider-Man
yet.
2.
Yeah.
it feels like I just should have played it in 2023 and I just didn't get around to it. So
Yeah.
Well, you have it
You should,
now.
you should play it. It's good.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, I
that's
will.
so Calvin, we can kind of go, maybe I'll go first real quick and you can kind of go into your thoughts too.
Try not to spoil me too much.
So the
Yeah.
crazy thing is that no, I'm just kidding. I was going to try and think of a ridiculous spoiler, but the
Well,
plot's kind of ridiculous.
everybody dies.
Literally
Before
everyone
it shows up.
I was going to say it's ridiculous. Spider-Man turns bad, but that's what the black suit is.
That's
so
literally
spoilers.
actually a spoiler.
It's a well-known spoiler at least, but so Spider-Man 2, kind of like God of War, is another one of those games where it's been 5 years since 2018 Spider-Man came out.
2018, same same difference.
And it's kind of the same deal. I think it looks a little better than Spider-Man 2018, but it's not like cutting edge of what the PS5 could do. It's kind of middle of the generation, or kind of in the in-between generation of transitioning from PS4 to PS5. And that's fine. I kind of expected that. I will say, I feel like Spider-Man 2 in some ways went just a little bit above compared to God of War Ragnarok, but by like 5%. So it's like, it still mostly met my expectations. There was a couple of things about it that I just had a blast with. There's a couple of like new mechanics that made it just a lot more fun to play and traverse. And I think, so the key difference for me for Ragnarok and why this is slightly ahead of it is I think there's a traversal mechanic you get in Spider-Man 2. I don't know how much spoilers in this. I'll just...
No, so the two things that I'm aware of that people talk about the most are the gliding and how it feels, more or less flying feels incredible.
It does.
It is a big change of pace from the web slinging. And then the other one is, which is actually a really cool thing I've heard about. I don't know if it works like this in practice, but it's what I've heard. If you fast travel, you can fast travel to any location on the map and it instantly loads you and you're like already swinging.
It's the most
really
impressive fast travel I've ever seen.
It's
incredible.
That's insane.
Yeah. And what's cool is like flying by itself.
I mean, that's
is cool.
rift apart. That's almost rift apart. Like that's
crazy.
crazy.
It was honestly like on that level.
Yeah.
So I think traversal is for a Spider-Man game. That's even more important to me than combat.
It's so important.
They did such a good job with traversal in 2018. I was like, how much better can it be? This is actually noticeably, substantially more fun.
Which is important because you're retreading a lot of similar ground.
It's enough to where going back to not having gliding and just being, restricted to swinging,
regular old stupid
you would notice it and you'd miss it.
I popped back into the original 2018 Spider-Man, and it felt like slow, which is funny because that game felt like a breeze when I played it. So, and what's cool too is the gliding is super fun, but you mix it in with your swinging still, and so it's like you'll fly in between skyscrapers and then like swing.
It's seamless between.
Sound pretty sick.
Yeah,
and the other cool thing.
Go ahead.
The last cool thing about traversal is because they have unlocked Queens and Brooklyn. You have
across
the river. You can go across the river and across the bridges, and it's like you can fly across the river. You can and the move in the original where you can like bounce off a pole, like you web sling onto like a point and bounce off it. You can like do that off the tops of like little sailboats.
That's cool.
And there's air currents that make you fly faster. It's just
that's pretty
traversal.
Cool. Because in the first game, if you got out near the water, you were just like you started to feel like a regular old man.
You just like fall in the water and you just kind of like swim.
Yeah, and it kind of broke the immersion. And so having one direction you could do that in, and Queens and Brooklyn and all of that was a pretty substantial map addition. And so the map felt a lot bigger. Oh, it was so good. And I have one other big thing I want to talk about it, but I want to hear your questions first.
Just two questions as an outside observer on this here Spider-Man stuff. Does it feel like a part B to 2018 in the way that Ragnarok did? Or does it feel like a sequel, or is it square in the middle?
I think it feels more like a sequel because I think the way 2018 left off with its story and everything was a little bit more final.
It was more wrapped up. And I guess the thing too is that with this Spider-Man, it's a sequel to two games combined, kind of.
Yes.
As opposed to just
which
one.
Actually that factors in as well. I think the fact that you combine, you play as both, and it's seamless to kind of switch between them worked really well, and it added a dynamic sense to the game where it's like, if you ever started to get a little tired of being in Peter Parker's story or whatever, and then you bounce over to Miles, that actually worked really well for pacing, for having, different characters that kind of play off each other. And yeah, it felt like a sequel to both of those. And I also think superhero franchises are a bit more serialized. And so it's like partly the format of Spider-Man of like, you can have a lot of different stories and it's like, oh, this year, this is what he's dealing with. Whereas God of War felt like an epic
That's
saga
true.
in two
Hmm.
parts.
I
Yeah.
probably wouldn't even ask that question if it weren't so much a similar location,
Yeah.
Right.
But
But I have to
anyway,
say, like, yeah, the way they add traversal things, they add the whole across the river.
yeah.
And then you have the two different characters. And then they do some interesting things too with like, one of the main villains is Craven the Hunter, and his hideouts are very jungly. And so it's like they
Hmm.
have some sort of very different feeling
Yeah.
environments, even
Cool.
within Manhattan, that work
I
pretty
like that.
well.
I'm getting a little excited to play this game.
It's
So,
actually really, it's
second
actually kind of
question.
crazy that it's at number 8 because it is
Yeah,
I
really
I
good.
know,
know. I
right?
know. It,
Yeah.
That's
it
okay.
felt it felt a little bad to put it
I
that
know. I
low,
feel
but
bad putting it that low.
Feels
It's really
bad.
good.
We should all feel bad. So,
Like,
second question is just it's been a long time since I played 2018, but Miles Morales, I loved the vibe of that game. Just his the way they captured his culture and like everything
mhm.
mixed into, that part of where was he at?
He was in
Harlem.
Part of
Harlem.
New York,
Yeah.
Harlem. Um, all that was great, and then the story was like actually emotionally impacting. I remember the story really impacting me from Miles in such
Hmm.
a smaller sample size. Do you think the story does it reach anywhere near what Miles accomplished? Do you think? Maybe you're not as high on
Uh,
Miles Morales as I
I,
am.
I guess I can't speak for Zach, but I think so. For me, it's tough to compare because I really, I think Morales hit some really high highs with its story and the ending,
Yeah,
and I don't know. I don't know if I've had enough time away from Spider-Man 2 yet to say that it does or does not reach those, but
but it's in the
it's close
ballpark.
at least for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say
Okay.
it's in the ballpark. Um, I mean, the cool thing is throughout the game, you are Miles is part of it, and so you still get his culture and his story, but his story intertwines more with like Peter Parker's story and some of the other characters, and it's cool because you're kind of playing like the experienced Spider-Man who has more adult things that he's trying to balance, and then you have Miles who's like coming out of high school and is kind of growing up and stepping into his own, and it uses those things in an interesting way, and like
Yeah,
they kind of the two Spider-Men need each other for this story, and I think that was cool.
sure.
So yeah, I think it's in
And
the
I don't need
ballpark.
it. I don't need it to be. It doesn't have to be Miles. It's not that it was Miles. I just felt in Miles Morales, Insomniac really took a step up from 2018 in their delivery of the story, in their characters, and the emotional attachment and impact you felt in that story. I felt was all easily a tier or two up from 2018. So
I think this kind of rides that wave pretty well,
Yeah.
okay,
so it's
okay,
good.
cool.
The last oh,
Eh,
oh go ahead,
oh, go
Gobby.
ahead. I was just gonna touch back real quick because I didn't really chime in much on it, but as far as the traversal, I feel like the traversal and the world is one of the things that really separated it, obviously, from 2018. But I think it's, if not for that, it would have literally just been the exact same game with a different, maybe better story. Um,
Yeah,
but the traversal is what really knocked it up several notches for me to where, for one, I felt like, despite graphically maybe not being, you know, top tier, um, it was like, I was like, this is a next gen game. Like, this could
It
not be
felt next
possible on the
cool.
gen, yeah.
PS4.
Yeah,
And that really elevated it for me.
And size of the
traversal for
map
me is
too,
big.
like
Yeah,
Yeah.
traversal plus size of the map. So it's like I agree. Like Manhattan would have felt retread. Traversal changed that up quite a bit,
Yeah.
and then adding the new area and then all the fast travel. So it's like instead of being like, oh, I need to get to Queens and I'm in southern Manhattan, and
Yeah.
you can just be like, oh, I'm going to fast travel, and all of a sudden you're just
And
swinging through like
literally
it's really
within
cool.
like
Yeah,
1 second or less, you
yeah,
were there
it's
swinging.
pretty cool. Um,
that's crazy.
I will
Yeah,
say too, I think one minor complaint I had about 2018, I think you had this too, Levi, is that it it didn't quite feel as immersive as you want. Like New York, it didn't quite feel as lived in as you'd hope. Like it was good, but not great. I think New York felt a lot busier. Like there was more traffic, more
There
people,
was
more
more traffic.
congestion,
Yeah.
to the point
I've
where
heard
it
that
was
as
kind
well.
of
Yeah.
impressive. Like it felt a lot more like New York. And there wasn't necessarily a ton of little things you could always go do, like to add to that. But I don't know. They did a good job of making New York feel
More
more lived in.
peripheral,
And
like you could. It just felt like
Yeah.
other
yeah,
people had
it felt
things
more
going
like New
on.
York. It was
Yeah,
cool.
And
that's awesome.
yeah, yeah.
The last thing I'll say that I think makes this, like, I liked this better than Ragnarok as a comparison, is that some of the end game stuff was pretty cool. The final boss, well, I kind of wish the final boss was a little harder, maybe, but like some of the arenas and some of the set pieces with the final boss were really fun. And
Yeah.
um, and I don't want to go too much into it for spoilers, but yeah, the final boss set piece stuff,
And
for what I
and
was hoping for, even was really cool.
the I really enjoyed the final boss. And again, very carefully trying to avoid any spoilers. The final boss, I think, contained enough um, surprises that
Yeah,
made it very exciting and very cool. Even after just like, because you kind of know who the final boss is going to be way before you get there, but it had enough
yeah,
surprises within the fight that made
totally.
it very
Cool.
fun.
Yep.
Very cool. Are we ready for 7?
I'm gonna have to get up and refigure out my charger.
All right, let me finish
All right,
chewing because that's gross.
my laptop is charging.
Okay, so for 7, I know that mine is not on either of your lists. What do you guys have? Obscure, or is it going to be on? Where do you want to
Mine is
start?
not gonna. I don't.
Calvin, pick who
well,
starts.
Mine's not obscure, but I don't think it's on either of yours. I don't think either of you have played it yet.
Zach, you start. I don't know if you started yet.
I don't think I have. Okay. My
I'll
number
start.
7 is Levi. Just kidding. Levi is my 7th
Oh,
favorite.
that's
thing
so
this year.
low.
It's a stacked year. What can I say? Normally you'd be like 5.
In a normal year, at least
In a normal
6.
year, you'd break the top 5. My number 7 was Alan Wake 2, the Remedy Studios follow up to
Okay.
Alan Wake, and
I have
Control
not
Universe.
gotten to it, so it's not on my list.
right.
Yeah,
I figured you hadn't, and I don't think you have either, Calvin. Right?
I want
you
to
will
play
have
it, but
to
I have not gotten
relay your thoughts as spoiler free as possible.
Yeah.
I know that it's a very well loved game, very immersive, has some really cool moments. If I can expect what I got in Control, so
to. Yeah,
I think so. I loved it. It's more survival horror than Control was. A little less action, more survival horror. But also one of those games that's hard to pin down. Like it's not. It's a very
more
strange,
ethereal.
unique game. Yeah, it kind of is its own thing. I didn't play the first Alan Wake, so I went into it worrying that was going to detract from my experience. It didn't. You also don't need to have played Control, but that adds to it. And I'm sure playing the first Alan Wake would add to it. I did watch like a recap of the first game to make sure I kind of knew what was going on, but um, it was really interesting. The story was super fascinating. I liked the main characters. You play as 2 different primary characters, Alan Wake and then Saga Anderson. It's kind of the FBI detective character, and the 2 of them are trying to figure out what's going on between our world and then some darker realities that are kind of intersecting with our world. Yeah, it's hard to even explain all of the reasons I loved it. Like some of the gameplay, the combat and stuff was very good, but nothing special. But the point isn't necessarily the combat. There were some really cool detective elements too, of like when you're Saga Anderson, as you collect clues, you have like a detective wall where you pin up your
Yeah.
clues and string them together. And
I've played
you
enough
don't.
to have seen that, and it was very
It,
interesting. At the
it's pretty
touch
cool.
of a button, you can instantly be transported to your mind palace.
Right. She kind of
Oh,
has
cool.
like
Where
in
she's
her mind, she like is putting
physical
together
space
clues.
where she's putting all these clues and stuff, and
That's cool.
It's a really cool mechanic because you're in the middle of the world and it doesn't pause anything. So I'm sure that comes into
No,
play.
so
but
if
you
you're in
just
somewhere
simply do-
dangerous, it can be a problem. But if you're in a
Yeah.
safe place, it's cool, and it's
Just
a
like
nice
meditating.
balance. You don't have to be a genius detective. Like it does a lot of that for you as you find the clues, but there's a little bit there. Sometimes you'll collect a few different clues and you'll go into your mind palace and you have to kind of figure out, wait, how do some of these things fit together a little bit? And it's, you're not doing a ton of actual deduction, which some people might not like, but I kind of liked it because the point, it kind of
It's
lets
more
you
about
feel
the
like
presentation.
it's the presentation. It lets you feel like a detective.
Yeah.
It
The
lets
atmosphere.
you, yeah, it immerses you very heavily, while still letting you just enjoy the experience and not getting you too, we talk about Baldur's Gate 3 and how it can be kind of draining. I think this prevented Alan Wake 2 from feeling draining in that way,
Or
while
getting
still
stuck
making you
and needing
feel
to
like you
raise
were
or
doing it.
something. Yeah,
Yeah, it was good.
totally. Yeah, I
And
played just enough. I played just enough. I played maybe an hour or two
okay.
before our trip this last month, and and then decided like I'm not going to finish it before the year's out, so I'll just wait. But in just that brief hour, yeah, everything that you said, like it just felt very. Everything was about presentation, and it was
It
presented
is. Yeah.
so immersive and just really puts you in a place and
Yeah.
allows you to take the role of a character without being too cumbersome or unwieldy.
Yeah. And it's the vibes of the game are so fascinating because it's so immersive and it's like part Twin Peaks, like the 90s television show. It's part slasher movie. It's part X-Files. It's all these weird things that come together that to become it's very much its own unique thing. But it's cool because it's connected to like the Control universe. So there's a lot of references and things you're finding out where if you've played Control, you're like,
Yeah, I hope
oh,
we're getting Control
interesting.
too,
Like
man.
there are certain names dropped where you're like, I know who that person is. There are certain
Yeah,
characters that maybe show up where you're like, I remember you.
Cool.
And it's in a really satisfying way. Um, there are some really interesting boss fights that where it's like again the combat is not the star, but it's very serviceable and good. Um, but it uses environments and other aspects of like making these things interesting, unique encounters. And I think the last thing I'll say is there are just some really interesting mix ups throughout the game, like moments, kind of like in Control, where you'll just have a moment where the music is kicking in and things are happening, and you're like, "What the heck? This is
this
awesome!"
is
So
I don't know what's
Yeah.
happening, but it's
honestly,
amazing.
Alan Wake could be higher on my list. It's like the survival horror
Unnamed
aspects also
stress right
make it a
there.
little unsettling and stressful to play, and so I put it a little lower because like there are other games that I think are more
Gotcha.
rejuvenating in that way. But Alan Wake 2, honestly, I could put it higher. On a given year, it could be in the top 3. It could even be number 1 for me, depending on how I'm feeling. Like it's really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not having played
I
it, I feel like the sentiment I've gotten from people is that the one word, in a strictly positive sense, the one word that would be that one would describe it as is weird.
Yeah, it is. It
But
is.
like in a strictly positive sense, like this
It
game is
is.
just
Yeah,
weird.
it is.
So
yeah,
It's great. And
and
it's like
I
nothing you've
haven't
played before. Yeah.
I haven't played it. I've only like seen very very minimal bits of it, but just knowing what you've said, what I do know, and that it's connected to Control and related, even though it's still a very different game. Just from how much I loved Control and how unique and special of a game that was, it has me plenty excited
Yeah.
to get to it.
Awesome.
yeah.
I can't wait to talk with you guys about it once you play it.
Yeah,
I have
absolutely.
like one or two gripes, like one real gripe that I'd like to talk about that is spoiler related, but I also feel like it may or may not be a gripe depending on certain things. I don't want to say more, but it overall
Gotcha.
incredible game.
I'll do my 7. I'll try and keep it quick so we can try and get up here to our top 5. I knew this was going to be a long sit down here, but that's okay. Um, my number 7 is Heavenly Bodies, man.
Really, I
I
mean,
just
I
I
can't
just was
argue it.
looking at it. I was looking at this list all day, and I was just like, dude, I had some of the most fun I had this year
Yeah,
playing Heavenly Bodies this past weekend. Weird title for a game, but it is a
yeah.
co-op. Do not play this game alone. Like,
No, yeah.
don't play this game alone. This game is made to be played in co-op and play it on Newtonian mode
Mm-hmm.
because it is frustrating and hilarious, and the antics that ensue are just oh, I mean, we just laughed. We laughed for. I
Top
mean, it
notch.
was a little short, but we laughed for 2 or 3 nights straight. And
Like
it doesn't
crying
overstay its
laughter.
welcome. Every mission is different and interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, the premise is you are astronauts and you are carrying out astronaut duties and doing different things that astronauts might do. But it's very physics based. And
You
in
control your
Newtonian
limbs
mode,
independently,
you
or
just
your arms.
control
That
your
sounds tough.
arms, and each stick controls your right and your left arm, and you can grab onto things and you pull yourself around in zero gravity.
That's
And the
cool.
trick is if anyone who's played like a Bennett Foddy type game, it's weird to control. It's very unintuitive at first. You get better at it, you really do, but it still is hilarious because you'll end up pushing yourself to where you can't grab onto anything, and you're just slowly floating, and you're just like waiting to try and grab onto something, and you have tasks that the two of you are trying to complete that are very difficult to do in zero gravity when you can only control your limbs in these weird ways. So it's so good. I found out, Cal, that there's DLC for it.
Oh,
Um,
really?
and supposedly it's similar size to the base game. So I very much look forward
That's
to
exciting.
whenever a long weekend and we play some more Heavenly Bodies at some
Yeah.
point. But it was just hilarious. The ending is a perfect ending to this video game. It's near the top of my list if I were recommending a co-op game to somebody. So
Yeah,
it's too
yeah,
much fun.
definitely.
Awesome. Yeah.
It very easily could have been in my top 10 and could have been on my list. I think at least one of the reasons it didn't make it for me was just so recent. Some other games were I've already had time to dwell on and kind of think of why they belong here, and it may deserve it, but it was so new that
Yeah, I was just trying to
I
think,
felt
like,
like maybe it was
next
rushed
year.
to put it in.
Next year at this time, what am I going to look back
Yeah.
on from 2023 in games? And I'm like, I feel like I'm going to think back on Heavenly Bodies because it was just one of those like
Yeah.
crying, laughing type
Mhm.
of games, which are always great. So,
And it was so kind of just a sudden find a little bit. I mean, I think we
and
knew
those are
about
always
the
the
game,
best when you don't even
but
like.
we were
I
just
had this
like,
game. It was
sure, let's try it.
yeah, it was a free game I've had for years,
Yeah.
and we just were like, let's check this out. And we're trying to play something co-op, and then for 2 days straight, that's all we played. And those
It
are
was a
always the
blast,
best when
yeah.
it's just something
Yeah.
completely off guard.
Yeah.
That is such a pleasant surprise. So.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Am I the last one for number 8 or 7? 7?
Yes, 7.
Yes.
What's your 7?
So my 7 is Bloodborne.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Your
So-
least favorite game of all time.
You hate it.
I hate
That's
it.
why it's in your
It's
top
your
10
least
games of the
favorite
year.
game that made your top 10.
Yeah, so that's kind of where it came in.
Fair
Like I
placement.
said before, it's a weird qualification for most disappointing game because
Right.
it's
Right,
still
'cause it's still
easily in my top
Context of
10.
FromSoft.
I still loved it. It's just with the expectations I had going in, and then some of what was delivered it was the only game that felt right fitting that
Yeah.
description, and it also came into play that the fan base for Bloodborne, I think, is a little.
Yeah, we're the worst.
Well, no, the hardcore fans of Bloodborne are so hardcore, and they claim like it's the greatest game ever made, and nothing comes close, and that it's perfect in every way. And I didn't go into it with those expectations, but that is the kind of the culture around Bloodborne.
It's hard to come
And-
into it in 2023 with the
And
amount of
so
fervor that the fan base has collected
Yeah.
over the years, waiting for a sequel, waiting for a remaster, getting
Yeah.
nothing. Because I think in 2015, when did it come out? 2015, I think.
just because
Yeah,
Dark Souls 3 was
2015.
2016, and it
Yeah.
was just before
I
that,
can
right?
see feeling that way in 2015, but as someone coming to it, good Lord, 8 years later, like
Yeah.
it's hard not to. An expectation is the perception of reality. Like if
and-
your expectations, you try to keep them low, but
Although,
And so between what
Although
I knew
nothing.
I really loved from some of the other games, and my expectations from that, and then the expectations that just the fans around it created, it set a higher bar than it was able to
So,
reach for me personally.
what I'm hearing is that you hate Bloodborne and you blame the fans.
right. That's what I heard.
What were
So-
you going to say, Zach? Although what?
I was
Go
going
ahead.
to say, although what's interesting is I played it this year too, or this past year, and I had played multiple other Souls games before it, and it's much higher on my list. So
Yeah,
I
so-
kind of have a
Oh,
counterpoint.
it's on your list.
Yeah, I forgot to chime in and say.
Well, we got to
so
stop
what I'll
talking
do
about
is-
it. We're going to talk about Bloodborne
okay.
So we'll
3
hold on.
times
No,
now.
I think that's good. We have your reasoning for why it's lower, and you already went into it
Yeah.
with your most disappointing a little bit. I can offer like kind of a counterpoint as to
Well,
why
what-
it's higher for me. When
when we get to yours, because I do want to.
Out of my control and definitely not my fault at all. But But we're back now, and we're going to continue talking about Bloodborne some more. No, are we done, or was there more? I can't remember exactly where we cut off.
I think where we left off, we just we it was my number 7. I talked about it a little bit more, but Zach, you mentioned that it's
Zach has it
on your
higher.
list and a little higher up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So
we'll throw in a
we'll
few more thoughts when we get to Zach's wherever.
we'll discuss it a little bit more when we get there, because up till now I've been kind of negative on it and talking about my disappointments, but I do want to talk about what I loved about the game. So I'll wait till you get to your ranking.
Cool.
Well, let's keep it rolling. Number 6 for me. Curious if this made either of your lists. Is Dead Space.
Oh,
I did not play it, so
I didn't play enough that it could really be on my list. But that maybe is an honorable mention, and in any other year that could absolutely make the list. But I did not include it.
Okay, so I'm alone. I'll keep it brief, but
It's a good game.
This game really knocks it out of the park with immersion.
Yeah.
I didn't play the original, so I can't speak to it from that viewpoint. But I mean, you could have told me this is a brand new game in 2023, which it is, but the fact that it's based, like all the bones are from a game that's a decade old, or I don't know exactly when it came out.
More than that. It was like
impressive.
2008 or 9. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, very impressive. It holds up so well in design concept. And it's just one of those games where, I mean, it was terrifying, but graphically it was out of the park. Lighting wise, playing it on the OLED TV was just, I mean, the dark, everything's so black and scary, and like, just so well done when it comes to lighting. And it's just one of those immersive games. The other thing I will say for it is that it has some really, really cool set piece moments. If you're into sci-fi, you're on this giant ship it's like a world-eating ship. And there's just, you go to places in the ship that are just visually very cool to see on this massive scale, parts of the ship that are doing what the ship is intended to do. And it's just, it does a really good job of creating a sense of place within the ship. And just to trudge through this game is both terrifying and a joy, and incredibly immersive, worth playing with headphones on in the dark. So I was just thinking back to it, and I'm like, this game really was memorable when it comes to atmosphere and immersion.
Yeah. It's an awesome game. I played like 3 to 5 hours of the remake this year. Only reason I didn't play more is just like so many other games kept coming out, and horror games are harder for me to finish because they're terrifying. So it's like I'll play a little bit and then like chicken out for a while. And so if there's other stuff that's not quite as scary, I tend to prioritize it. But I really loved it, and I'm glad you included it on your list because I'd forgotten to mention it. But it is really good. I played the original back in the day, and it's this is a very faithful remake, but they also did a great job of like making it feel like a modern game, while still it's like very much the same game at the same time. So it's super cool.
The last thing I'll say, parting comment, is that we talked about how our appreciation for Control, and not only the vibes of that game, but the abilities and the way it feels to control and manipulate objects, kind of levitate or telekinesis, those types of things. Use the
force.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, this might be the next best example of that. I was playing through this game, and you get abilities, you get telekinesis. There's 0G moments that feel like you're, levitating like you would in Control. And this game controls like Control. I wouldn't have expected it going into Dead Space, but if you like that and you kind of miss those abilities from Control, Dead Space, it has it, and they feel really good to use.
Yeah.
I have not played it, and I wasn't thinking about it, but if it comes that close to Control, which I wasn't expecting, and already immersion and an atmosphere go a long way for me, so it might have to be added to my list to play.
Yeah.
There you go. There's my pitch. So number 6 for me. What do you guys have?
Calvin, what's your number 6?
My number 6 is Remnant 2.
What?
Yeah.
That's
I
more
take it, it's
enraging
higher
than Baldur's Gate at 8, you insane man.
Oh man.
Yeah,
number 6 for you.
it's one of
Holy
the
crap!
it's one of the ones that I
How do you have
I
5 games
anguished
above
over.
Remnant 2?
It's one of the
You
ones I
must have
anguished
played.
over.
Okay.
Um,
All right. Well, do you want
I
to
don't know.
do you want a sentence here? Or do you want to wait till we get to mine?
We can wait till we get to yours. Yeah, all
Okay.
I'm saying is that it was a tough decision, and
And you made the
it's
wrong
one that
one. Yeah.
I never felt fully confident anywhere I put it, but
Yeah.
it's where it
Gotcha.
landed. So
Okay, number 6. All right, what do you got, Zach?
Yeah, these top 6 or 7 are like such a toss up for me. Um, number
Throw
or
us
8
6,
or
any
9.
more what the heck
yeah,
moments. We'll see.
number 6 for me is I'm sure on both of your guys' lists, so I won't go to it right now. And maybe this is enraging too. Lies of P is number 6 for me.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, you gotta be
Now
kidding me.
there are 2 reasons why it's this low. One is that I am nowhere near finished with it. I'm like
Okay, all
12
right.
to
I was gonna
15
say I don't
I'm like
think you
maybe
beat
12
it.
10 to 12 hours in maybe. I'm not super
Where did
Okay,
you
then
leave
that's
off?
fair. If
maybe
you're
not
10 to
even
12
that. Maybe
hours
8,
in,
8 to 10
I
hours.
I
I'm
will
not
allow it.
far enough to confidently put it higher than some other things, although I think
Okay.
it seems to have the merit. And what I've
Okay.
played, it's like a 10 out of 10 game.
Gotcha.
The other reason it's not quite that high is because some of the things higher up on the list are older games that also are just, it's like, how do you rank these games against each other? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I'll save some of my thoughts, but Liza P's
Okay.
great. I can't wait to keep playing it and finish it as
Definitely
well.
on my
Honestly,
list.
Yeah.
you absolute fools. All right.
I know.
Number 5. I'm betting this is on Calvin's list. I don't know about you, Zach. Tinykin.
I haven't played it yet.
It's my number 5.
Oh, no
Nice.
way.
Yeah.
Calvin, you're just
As soon as
channeling
you
8 with Zach and you're channeling 5 with me. How'd you
as
do
soon
it?
as you said you think it might be on my list, I knew you were going to say Tinykin.
Dude, there was moments where I was like, can Tinykin be number 1? Could it be?
Man,
And
I'm
it could,
excited for it.
but
It's one
it
of the
was the
very
thought
few
crossed my mind.
games. It's one of the very few games, even amongst other games that I love and are some of my all-time favorites. There's a very very short list of games that I would describe as just perfect. 10 out of 10 in all categories, and Tinykin is one of them.
Wow.
Yeah. It's an absolute joy to play from start to finish. Okay, where do I start? The art style
Mm-hmm.
is one of my favorite art styles I've ever seen. It does this very playful, stylized 3D art style, but all the characters in the game are Paper Mario, like they're 2D characters
2D, they
that
like flip.
that never turn. They always just
Yeah.
turn with you, so you never see them from the side or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And it's just such a charming art style. I visually this game was I just enjoyed looking at this game every second I was playing it, which goes a long way for me. And then the other aspect is just um, I don't know. This game to me was like channeled what it felt like to play Toy Story or Buzz Lightyear back in the day on PS2 or something. Like it's just this
Totally.
everything's bigger than life. You're this tiny little toy-sized figure or whatever,
It's
and
like
you're
Toy Story meets
exploring.
Pikmin.
Yeah, and you're exploring the mundane rooms of a home in a majestic, magical way,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like Toy
It,
Story
it
would do.
turns a bathroom into an amazing set piece that is
It's
Oh,
just
adventure.
like the
that is
coolest room.
such a cool. Oh, it's so cool. And the other thing that was a surprise to me is the control, the movement in this game it's so good. It's perfect. It's tight
To the
controls when it
point.
comes to platforming. But go
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah, you're about to say
I
what
was
I'm
gonna
about to
say,
say, so go ahead.
to the point that it has time trials, where it's like a race. You have to get follow the checkpoints and get to the end within a certain time, and
Oh,
it
I
controls
love
really
it.
tight, and they're
And they're so
challenging, but
satisfying and fun to
yeah, they're
play.
a lot of fun.
Yeah, the mechanic in this game, you have a like a surfing mechanic almost, where you have a bar of soap, and you can just
Nice.
at any
Just jump
moment's
on a
notice,
bar of
just
Anywhere.
soap.
push a button anywhere, just push a button, and you're surfing on a bar of soap, and
Oh, that's great.
And you
it
can
feels
grind on
so
edges
good.
or wires
Yeah.
or
And then when you get to edges or wires and things, you can actually grind across areas on it. And it's just to run around as your little character and jump and platform feels great. And then to instantly go from that to like grinding or surfing feels perfect. And then you get certain abilities with your Tinykin that also feel so good. You'll be running around platforming, you'll surf to this other area, and then you get these tinykin that allow you to basically shoot up vertically, or like a ladder or something. But the way they did it is so mechanically satisfying to do because you
And
push
the
like
sound design of
L2
it too.
the sound design, the feedback. You push L2 or R2, and you just boop, 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 like immediately stack on top of your tinykin. And all of that in combination, when you just kind of get into the flow state of playing this game, is just so satisfying to play. It looks amazing from start to finish. It really just it captures the childlike wonder just so perfectly, and is just a great package to play. So yeah, it's 10 out of 10.
Man, I can't wait to that's been on my list that I want to play. I'm so
It's so
thrilled to
you
hear it's
cannot
that
miss
good.
on Tinykin. It's
Okay,
so
I'll
good.
play. I'm gonna play
Yeah,
it this year. That sounds great.
It's a must play.
Yeah, nice.
Absolutely. It's an easy recommend for anyone. No scary monsters that you have to sever their limbs or anything like that.
Right, right.
So there's
right,
my
that's
what is
both-
that? 5.
And
That's
that was
5
both of your
for
number
both of
5,
us.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. My number 5. This is also maybe going to be enraging, but I have my reasons. Tears of the
Oh,
Kingdom.
I know what it is. All right. Well, we can talk about it later.
Tears of the
I mean,
Kingdom.
obviously.
Yeah. And again, the only thing I'll say is that part of
You
the
haven't
reason
played
it's
much of it,
this
though.
low is I beat the first area and the first major boss. So I've done like one of 4 major zones. There's a lot I haven't done in this game. And there's just a lot of other things on this list that I think will make sense as I get to them. But I mean, it's incredible. Tears of the Kingdom could be a game of the year. I love it. I'm sure as I finish it, it's going to be high up in my favorite games, but it's a crazy year.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Wow. 5. That's crazy.
I can start with 4
Yeah. Let's go.
Yeah,
Cal,
go
what's
for
your
it.
4? Number 4.
Because we might keep it quick because my number 4 is Tears of the Kingdom.
Ah,
Okay. Fair enough. Mine is still yet higher.
Okay, so yeah, we can still wait to talk about it further, but it's one of those that was another tough decision. It felt a little bad to put it at number 4, but it's where it
I
landed.
suspect Calvin,
I'm
like
sensing
Calvin,
some
like
Breath
me,
of the Wild fatigue setting in here.
that's a little bit of
what's
it, but I
gotta
also
be.
I think the other thing is Calvin and I are playing some of the best games from a few years ago this year as well. And so that is diluting the list, right? Once I get to my top couple, you're going to see why, but there's a few games that are some of the best games ever made that I happened to play this year. And if that hadn't happened, Tears of the Kingdom would have been like,
That's
2 or 3
fair.
probably.
Yet I still feel like for me, Tears of the Kingdom is easily a top 5 game of all time. So
Yeah, we're going to see. The other thing is
spicy,
I haven't
maybe
finished
not, I
it.
don't
That's
know.
so yeah, we'll have to see.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I mean, a little context. You played Breath of the Wild at the end of 2022, or like even into the beginning of
No, I played
2022, right?
Breath of the Wild this past year. Spoiler alert as to
Okay.
what's going to be on my list.
Oh,
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's hard to like as much as I think calling Tears of the Kingdom DLC is insanity. That's a dumb statement to me. There you can't go from Breath of the Wild straight into Tears of the Kingdom because it's not that part 1, part 2
And I
kind
did.
of game. It's you just can't do it. So
and
it ends
and
up number 5 on your list, like an insane
right.
person.
And again, like it wasn't so much that I was exhausted and didn't like it as it was I decided it was like I'm going to enjoy this more if I just take a small break. And there were so many other games, and then I didn't finish it, and now it's like, well, I haven't finished it, so it feels weird to put it at like number 2 or 1 or something.
It'll be
I
his
feel like
number
this
3 in 2026.
Right, exactly. It's gonna be really high up in a few years. So anyway, that's my number 5. And Calvin, that was your number 4.
Calvin just said 4. Yeah.
Okay,
And
so
we can just move on since we'll talk about it more soon.
okay, my number 4 was Baldur's Gate 3. So I'm
surprised that it's that low.
Yeah, well, I
Calvin,
didn't finish
it's higher
it.
for you.
Yes.
See, okay. I didn't. Well, not only did I not finish it, I didn't get nearly as far into it yet, just because of
you in
timing.
Act
2? Have you finished Act 1?
No. So what I did is I played like 15 hours, and I love it. But those 15 hours taught me a lot about how to think about the game. And I've played D&D and stuff, but I just kind of went into it willy nilly and just I made like whenever I start a fantasy game like that, I always pick like a hunter and I get like my wolf companion or whatever. And as I got to like the 15-hour mark, I realized I'm not really loving this class. It kind of feels like I'm doing the same thing I always do. And you realize the sheer possibilities in the game. And I realized I want to do something different, both in terms of class, but also just the character at large. And so it's like, I know you can respec and stuff, but I was like, you know what? I think I need to start fresh and like rethink about how I'm playing this. So I started over, and I'm playing. I'm going for Swords Bard, is kind of the subclass specialty, and this game's
That's very
incredible.
similar to what I have.
It's so cool, and I uh, I feel like this game could be much higher for me. It might be like a top 5 game for me. I need to play more and like give it some time.
I do think
Yeah.
you haven't finished Act One in entirety, have you?
No, I
Or
have not.
you? So I do think Act One is still great, but
Act one is great, but
the
at the
I
end of
think the
Act
best
one going into Act
content.
two is when it's like,
Oh,
whoa.
I can't wait.
I think
I
the
can't
best
wait.
content is end of Act One on. Like
And I
Act
Okay.
say
One
that as
is the
someone who put
weakest
it
part
at
of the
8,
game, but
but
so
Yeah, right.
it's it's one of those games where it's like it's literally exhausting for me to play, but when you finish a session, you're like, oh my god, that's why
That's so
this game
cool.
is incredible, you know?
Totally. I feel that a little bit,
So
whereas I love, and so I'm a huge fantasy nerd. I love like classic fantasy. I've played a fair amount of D&D. This is very much up my alley. I love the narrative stuff too when it's well done, and I feel like the characters and the story the story is super interesting, but also the narrative is so unique. Like unlike something like God of War or whatever, where it's like the narrative and the characters kind of are what they are. You really can influence this, and I'm already
you
noticing
have
on
so
yeah.
much
my
agency
second
as the
playthrough.
player.
I've done a few things differently, and also like I have a different background. My character's a little like a different race, and it's like that changes how everyone reacts to you. Like the amount of possibilities, and that games always say that, right? Oh, the amount of possibilities, you choose your destiny, whatever. This is the
Right,
first
yeah.
time I've truly felt that way, and
Agreed.
it really feels like you change the story, and it's so cool. It is a little exhausting because of that. I'm always terrified, like, oh man, I really got to think about everything I'm doing. So that I can see that
Yeah.
dragging it down for in terms of like leisure or whatever. But I think this also
Yeah,
is
well,
like
I've got
genre defining.
yeah, I've got responses and things to say, but let's wait for to see where it lands for Calvin before we
Right. I'm sorry. That's
have
right.
our
Calvin's is
full
higher. Okay.
discussion.
Yep. Put a pin in
Um,
it.
so 4 for me is not on either of your lists, and shame on you guys because Jedi Survivor is maybe the most underrated game of 2023. Um,
Ah,
it was
I
so
suspect
good,
that
and
would have made my list if I
You
only got a couple hours into it. So
you
I don't
have
know.
you have convinced me at least because I didn't really have any intention of playing it. But I think you've convinced
it's
me that
so
I
stinking good.
want to.
I'm shocked at how much better it is than Fallen Order. I'm blown
That's
away
awesome.
because I'm someone who did not like Fallen Order. I didn't finish it. Um, and I will say most of the reason this game is underrated is because it came out to a terrible technical launch, and that
Yeah.
sucks. It sucks for a lot of reasons because people put money down, um, and the game's not finished. But it also sucks for the game's sentiment because maybe there's a good game underneath there that no one gets to really experience. Um, at a good quality bar at launch. And thankfully for me, I didn't play this until um, October, I think, on PlayStation 5, which I've also heard the PC version is just still an absolute dumpster fire and don't play this on PC, is the general sentiment I've heard. PS5, I thought it was pretty solid. There were moments, I mean, I think I might have more screenshots and video captures from this game than any game this year. Um,
Wow.
it's not the best looking game you're ever going to play, but it's also just not bad at all. Like there's a lot of environments and set pieces that were really cool and visually stunning. Um, the I'm trying to figure out where to go here. I want to start with the story. The story I thought was so much better than Fallen Order. They do a good job of building off the characters that you get to know in Fallen Order. Um, so if you did enjoy Fallen Order or you got to know those characters, there's more of them in here, and I think they're better. I think the writing was surprisingly really good in this game, like just consistently from start to finish. The dialogue between characters, the cutscenes were all so much better than I would have ever expected. Like genuinely good, and not even just from setting a low bar for it. Um, some laugh out loud moments. The characters were just so well written. Um, some good surprises. The plot was really good. Character development and plot twists, and just the general premise of the story, I thought was really good. It kind of has this treasure planet vibe to it, which I'm a sucker for. When you can get kind of a space fantasy sci-fi thing going, but you've got a MacGuffin you're trying to find a planet. Like, sign me
Mm-hmm.
up. I'm good for
The
that.
centroid of the mechanism.
There were several things in this game that gave me Treasure Planet vibes, and if you can do
I
that in a
love it.
space
Yeah,
game, then you're gonna win me over. So um, that was awesome. Traversal. The traversal in this game is so good, which is funny because notably in Fallen Order, I thought the traversal felt so bad in Fallen Order. Um, just clunky and like the wall running didn't feel good.
it was pretty
And
clunky. Yeah,
in this game, it really feels like they polished the wall running, and then the additional abilities that you get beyond that, um, you can start to chain them in ways that make. That's always what makes a platforming game so great is when you get two or three or four great abilities, but they all chain together in such interesting ways, and you can start to create this, weave this tapestry of platforming and do really cool things. And it
yeah.
also changes the way they can design stuff because they can expect you to use things in a certain order to reach places that would be inaccessible otherwise. So
Hmm.
every new traversal mechanic I got, I was just like, oh, this is awesome, and it feels good to use. It opens up the world. um, I thought the combat was better in this game by a wide margin. You get stances in this game, kind of maybe picture Ghost of Tsushima. Um, and you get to pick, there's like 4 or 5 different stances of lightsaber you can take, whether it's dual, single,
Hmm.
um, double,
Darth Maul style.
or you can
Yeah.
even do you can even do a pistol and a lightsaber. Like
Hmm.
there's different stances, and basically you get to level them up and pick 2 of your favorite, and you can switch between these stances.
Yeah.
And it just really worked. I felt like combat was more polished, parrying felt better, but then also changing your stances and fighting different enemies based on their weaknesses and things
Yeah.
um, felt a lot better in this game. And it was a long game. Not gonna lie, it's there's a lot of meat on the bones here, but I really didn't. I don't even feel like it overstayed its welcome. I enjoyed it from start to finish, and whether it was puzzles or combat or traversal or the story, I just was having a blast the entire time, which I did not think I would be able to say of a sequel to Fallen Order. So,
That's
um,
impressive too, just with a long game to be able to
Yeah.
feel
yeah.
that way afterwards.
And the other crazy thing is there's only like, I think there's 5, maybe 6 locations total, but only 3 of those are truly like large, main locations. So there's really only like 2 or 3 main locations, and yet it does such a good job of different environments within the planet or whatever. I never felt like anything was overstaying its welcome in a certain area. um, it keeps you, man, the pacing for the story and the environments in this game were so well done that at no point was I like, man, am I ever going to get out of here or whatever. um, oh, and then the last thing I want to shout out, it does a cool thing. I love this in games when it does it well. There's a town, a hub area, and you get to send people back to it. And at first I was like, oh, that feels like a tack on, like whatever. And no, like literally the area comes alive, and you start to get people playing music or people making a garden, and there are
Oh, that's
things you can
cool.
actually
Yeah.
interact with. There's seeds you can find throughout the galaxy, and you get to curate your own garden, and there's an NPC that's kind of her whole
Mm.
deal. And um, just really, it's such a well done hub. Like I looked forward to going back to this hub and
That's
just
awesome.
chilling,
Yeah.
and it was such a good environment, and seeing the new people I'd sent back and how more alive it was becoming. So
That is cool.
man, great game. It was a blast. Number
That's
4.
awesome. I'm so excited. The fact that it's that high on your list is crazy to me because
Yeah,
you
yeah.
really don't like the first one, and to the point where like I liked it.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with a lot of your gripes about it, but I think I was able to enjoy it fairly well despite some of those things. So I think I'm really going to love this game. I played the first 3 hours or so of Survivor. It was like there's so many things going on. I just never got around to finishing it, but it's
Yeah.
on
And
my
I feel like
list.
it
And
starts a little slow, to be honest. The
it
first
does.
little
Yeah.
start, I was having a hard time getting into it. I started this game the first 10, 15 minutes probably 3 times. And I kind of started to think, man, am I ever actually going to like jump into this? And finally, I forced myself to play the first hour or two. And I was like, well, I was hooked after.
Yeah.
Once you get to the main location, it's like, okay, I think I'm here
Yeah.
for this.
And
So,
I have gotten to the main location. It explored it a little. It was really cool. So that's awesome.
okay.
I can't wait to finish it.
Yeah,
I think it
I
would be
look
on.
forward to playing it.
I think if I had played more, it would have been on this list. Yeah.
It's tough because it's one of those games where it's just like, it's one of those that's very much in danger of falling into the dark void of a backlog because it doesn't stick out in the way that some others might.
Totally.
It feels kind of like that generic um, IP. cash grab. It can fall into that kind of like a Guardians of the Galaxy game, which was good, but like, is it a must play? No. But I think if you like Star Wars at all,
Yeah.
even if you don't, I'm not that. I don't care if it's Star Wars or not. I care if it's a good game, and I thought this was just really well done from start to finish.
Well, as someone who doesn't really care much about the current state of Star Wars, like a lot of the stuff they're doing now, I haven't kept
Yeah,
up with
this is
it. And I
probably
don't
the
really,
best Star Wars you can get in
I think is the
2023 right here.
that's why I like even Fallen Order. Like despite some of the clunkiness, like it felt like Star Wars in a way that I used to like 15, 20 years ago. So if this is a
Yeah.
better iteration of that, that's awesome.
And this game made me like Cal Kestis.
Mhm.
Is a bona fide character to me now. Like
Yeah.
I have a connection with him, and maybe some people got that from Fallen Order, but I just thought he was so well written, and the way he bounces off of all the characters in this game. There's genuine character arcs. Yeah. Anyways,
Nice.
I'll stop
Very
rambling. But
nice.
yeah, number 4, it just kept climbing, and then it stopped just short of the top 3. So
Nice. That's still impressive.
That's impressive.
Okay.
absolutely. All
So
right, number
we're at top
3.
3.
Number
My
3.
top 3 have all been brought up to this point. Is that I don't think that's the case for you guys though.
One of my top 3 has been brought up.
Two of mine have been brought up.
All right, well, let's focus on 3. Has everyone's number 3 been brought up?
Mine has.
Mine has not.
Okay, so Zach, let's hear your mystery top 3 game.
My top 3, maybe this is controversial too, I don't know, for being this low, is Sekiro. So I played and beat Sekiro at the end of last year. I had never gotten around to it. And I played it after playing Elden Ring, Dark Souls 3, and Bloodborne. So it was like my 4th FromSoft game. I had a lot of experience by that point. It's phenomenal. It's the best combat I've ever played in a video game. I think it has the best bosses I've ever fought in a video game. To the point where I'm considering doing the boss rush, which I'm not the type of person.
So
I'm not the type of person who likes those, but the bosses are so good. And like the satisfaction of beating, especially like the last boss, when you're chaining all of your abilities together.
Culmination of everything you've learned.
It's a culmination of everything you've learned, and you feel like a samurai who has trained, because it's not just mashing buttons. It's like you gotta do the dance, and when you do,
it's a game
so cool.
that gives you the feeling of mastery in a way I've never experienced in a video game.
Same.
Because when you do that boss gauntlet, I mean, when you beat the game, sure. When you do the boss gauntlet, you feel like a master of the shinobi arts. Like you are just aggressively beating the trash out of these bosses, and there's nothing
me and Levi
about it.
Yeah, and
me
it has
Levi
nothing.
both did the longest gauntlet. We did all of them, but we did the longest gauntlet. And the hardest one, it has all the bosses and a few extra harder versions of some of the bosses, and
that'll say if you don't do the whole thing, at least do the smaller ones, because I'm pretty sure they introduce harder
the revised
variants
version of bosses.
like think of Father Owl. There's
Mhm.
a harder variant of Father Owl, and they're such good fights. Like it just makes it that little bit harder.
Yeah,
I think the harder version of Genichiro is the better fight.
Okay. Yeah, because he was a good fight.
That
in the main
completing that gauntlet is still the most satisfying and impressive thing I feel like I've done in a video game, and it's so fun to have done that.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I'm glad it clicked enough with you to make it your top 3. I'm disappointed it's only top 3 in 2023, but also you going into it, I wondered. Yeah, you going into it, I wondered, like, will it, because it is so different, and you playing it after playing Elden Ring, after playing Bloodborne, after playing Dark Souls 3, it's your last one, which I guess that's the normal way to do it, but it is so different that a lot of people I don't think stuck with it. I don't think a lot of people waited till it clicked or whatever.
Well, I mean, the difference
it's
is
a hard
actually
learning
not
curve.
why it. Yeah, and that actually is not at all why it's number 3 for me necessarily. Like I think this game is like, I loved the difference. Like I adjusted to that fairly quickly, I think, because those were my expectations that I had to change my play style.
Yeah, we tried to help you go into it with as much.
And you did. I think it's a mindset thing, because once you like say, okay, I'm going to learn the way it wants me to play, it clicked, and I love that game. Like the combat, again, it's the best combat I've ever played. It's probably in my top 5 games ever. And it could be like my top 3 for this year are almost interchangeable in terms of how much I like them. It's really hard to pick, and I'm I'm prioritizing based off a lot of different things, mostly due to feelings and immersion and some other things. And so the other two, you're going to see like there's factors that, technically I think Sekiro maybe is the best game on my list this year. But
So if Sekiro's number 3 this year and it's in your top 5 all time, is it safe to say then your top 3 is part of your top 5 all time?
I think so. I haven't sat down and redone it, but yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I
My
mean, hey,
my
that's a heck of a year in gaming
It's a
right there to
crazy it's a crazy year.
I haven't revised my all time favorite games, my top 10 all time games in a while. It needs revision. It's a little outdated at this point, but
Yeah.
I
Maybe
think
that's a
there's gonna
discussion we
be
can
some
have at some point this year.
Yep.
some changes after this year. And
Yeah.
but I'm curious to see what moves because like Sekiro, I don't know if that's gonna move, but that's been in my
Yeah.
top 3 all time favorite games for a long time.
Yeah.
I think
I
after
see why. It's
2023
great.
is a good year to sit down and look at your
Redo
all-time
it.
list and
Yeah.
maybe have a
Yeah,
podcast
it
discussion
needs
about
some
it because it
changes.
shook up a lot of things. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
cool.
But
Well, I'm
Sekiro,
glad. Top
I think
3.
it holds up. I think it holds up, and I think if anyone likes Souls-like games or likes that stuff, try it and go into it expecting you need to learn to play it on its terms. But if you do, it's one of the best things ever. Honestly, last thing I'll say about it is I went in thinking, oh, Sekiro is going to be the hardest FromSoft game I've ever played. I don't, I don't know that it really felt that way. I mean, it's hard like all of them, but it in some ways it felt easier because it felt like the most fair of all of the games. And so
Well,
if you really learn and you just do the dance,
Yeah.
it's
Because they don't
forgiving
have
is
to
not the right
account for
word, but
any
it very
bullcrap.
much
They
it
don't have
gives
to
you
account for you having this
there's no real
insane build
yeah.
or
There's
and
very little like RNG type stuff that'll go
it's
wrong.
mono
And
e
it's
mono.
yeah, and it's
it's
the
a
more you do
weird
it, it's a
balance
dance.
Yeah.
Go
where
ahead. Yeah.
the learning curve is very difficult and every boss for the most part you is a learning curve. You have to really learn bosses and it's punishing and it
Mm-hmm.
in that way it's one of the most difficult games. But when you get past that learning curve and master the combat, it
Yeah.
breaks into almost easy, which is a
Mhm.
weird combination, but
Yeah,
it's so
it
satisfying.
does spill over at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
All
So
right,
it's
Cal.
great. It's amazing. Yeah.
Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
It's all good. I'm wrapping up.
Where do you want to start? Or you want me to do 3? You or me?
You go ahead.
All right. Number 3 is
So
Remnant
you
2
said
for
you're
me.
Remnant 2. Okay. All right.
Yeah, and I really grappled with these top 3, shifting them around, but yeah, I don't know. Remnant 2, man, Remnant 2 was so good this year. I mean, just I played a little bit of Remnant 1 and I can see like, oh, I can see the bones of where they came from and how they made Remnant 2, but it's just better in every way.
Mm-hmm.
And really what makes it shine, I think it's a fun game to play on your own. Like absolutely. If you like Souls-like games and you like shooters, there's a combination here and they pull it off masterfully. Like the way that you
Mm-hmm.
can kind of kind of trudge your way through levels as a Dark Souls game would expect from crystal to crystal or bonfire to bonfire. Feels very Souls-like and feels satisfying. But the boss fights are just spectacles. I mean, the set pieces are amazing. The fights rival, a set piece you might see in Elden Ring sometimes, or any of these FromSoft games where
Yeah.
it's like I think of the last boss in Elden Ring. There's a boss
Yeah.
in Remnant 2 that reminds me of that. Like just really cool boss fights. And then I think this game
Locations.
just the locations are very cool. The random elements you would think could be frustrating, and I could see some situations where maybe they would be, but really what it ends up being is just really cool because you'll roll a campaign and you'll have this whole storyline and different things and puzzles you find, and then you'll play with a friend or re-roll the campaign, and there's a lot of similarities, but there's something completely new. Almost every play session, pretty much, or every a couple times a play session. And I think what this game does better than anything that really elevates it is the co-op. So often co-op can pull a game down, can make the experience feel lesser, like we talked about with Mario or something. Co-op in this game just works. It works really well. Their balancing is one of the best I've seen. You know how sometimes you'll get 2 people and it's like, oh, it's way harder now, or oh, it's too easy now. The balancing is so good in this game. We went from 3 players to 2 players, and I played some solo, and the difficulty felt similar no matter whether it was 1, 2, or 3 people, and that's
That's really
really
neat.
hard to pull
Yeah.
off. And it just really contributes toward the game feeling great to play because the challenge is there no matter what. And if me and Calvin hump it, if we're humping Remnant 2, if we jump in
it's
together,
a really good game.
that was it'll really get you, this Remnant 2.
It'll
You
get you
got to
going.
sit down and hump in Remnant 2. Good Lord, what a
It's the
Freudian slip there.
best Freudian slip ever. Yeah.
It's up there. If you jump in though with two people and that challenge is there, it just feels it feels good to have a satisfying boss fight and to pull off that crazy victory
Yeah.
with someone else when that balance is right. That's so important.
Totally.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
man, we had a
And I'm
we had
not
a blast
sure I've
playing
ever
this.
played a co-op game that has done that as far as like combat and bosses. I'm not sure I've really played a co-op game that has pulled that feeling off.
No, it's so rare and it's so hard to do in a game. So often
Yeah.
the balance is thrown off when you add in multiple people. And then you factor in the fact that this game also, better than Remnant 1, allows you to really customize builds. In this game, you get to pick basically two classes that you can combine. Maybe you're a healer and an engineer.
Dual class.
And the fact that you can dual class, and there's like 12 or so classes by the end of the game, you really get to kind of customize your party and bring different things to a fight. Whether you're maybe more so healing or you can take more damage or you're a DPS build, kind of has that almost WoW element where it's like you can make a party and bring different things and create your own play style. And it all just comes together and feels really good. It's also, I think it's one of the first Unreal Engine 5 games, and the art style, and
it is a very good looking game.
It's very visually, it's great. It looks great.
There were overall, I think the game was just very impressive visually, but there was a few key set pieces and moments that were just like jaw dropping.
Yeah, and the biggest, one of the biggest things I've kind of forgot to really.
I was wondering if you were going to get to this.
The puzzles, man.
Yeah. Yep.
Is that what you're thinking? The puzzles in this game.
The puzzles. I was waiting for you to get to it.
I had some of the coolest moments. I think we had some of the coolest moments in co-op, sitting there trying to figure out. It's very like Indiana Jones, or like I don't know, something like that, where it's just like you're taking symbols and maps and layouts of areas, and you're trying to put together kind of subtle contextual.
There is some reading involved,
or like do really cool stuff.
Like you'll find a book or you'll find a note left around, and sometimes it's just lore and world building, but sometimes it'll have some context clues and some important information that'll play into a puzzle, and you put it together, and it's really cool when it
really felt like a lot of times it felt like you're solving these really cool in-world puzzles to reach treasure, like you would in Indiana Jones or like something like that. Like they did it so well, and the puzzles were really good. I mean, some of my all-time favorite puzzles, short of The Witness, were like in this game and figuring them out, and just like these aha moments, and just how cool they were too. Atmospherically, the puzzles were really cool to solve, and even the reading that wasn't related to a puzzle is really well written in this game. It's worth reading. It was enjoyable and interesting, and I just think they clearly put their I think they put a lot of heart into this game from start to finish, and I look forward to jumping back into the DLC, humping back into the DLC, if you will. Probably sometime in 2024.
I actually keep forgetting that there is DLC. That's exciting.
Yeah, some has come out, and there will be more. So I think we decided to hold off till there's a little bit more. But
you're making me want to play this. I don't know when I'd find time for it, but it sounds.
It's
awesome.
so good, but you kind of miss the like.
I kind of missed
our.
It, I know.
But also, if you wanted to jump in for the DLC, I think it would be that easy. I think you could jump in and join us.
Maybe we'll try that
this year. Yeah. So there is number 3.
It was number 3.
Number 3.
Cal, what do you got?
My number 3 is Lies of P.
Okay.
Since you're number 3 and you're the last number 3, number 2 is mine, Lies of P. So we can talk about it now.
Okay.
That's my number 2.
And it was my number 6. So yeah.
But,
I'm surprised it's number 3 for you, honestly.
I think you made
grappled with it being game of the year.
Yeah, no, I did too for a long time. There was a few games that ended up lower than I expected that were grappling for game of the year. There was a few that like this could be game of the year, and they ended up lower than I expected. So it was It's just a tough year.
Yeah. In fact,
It
for
is a
most
tough
of
year.
the end of the year after playing Lies of P, I just kind of assumed it was my game of the year, and it fell to 2 for me. But
Yeah,
um,
it
it
was
is
kind of
it
similar to
is
me, but it ended at 3.
my synopsis, real quick, of it is that it is not only the best FromSoft like game ever made, um, it competes with FromSoft.
It's
It competes
as
with
good.
Bloodborne. It competes with Dark Souls
Yeah,
3. It competes with Sekiro. In my opinion, it should be considered among them and deserves to be ranked in a certain order with them, not de facto behind them. Which
it
I
shouldn't.
you can't say that of any
It doesn't
other game.
need to be
I don't think.
separated
Yeah,
separate of FromSoft.
no,
It can be counted as them.
It's from soft quality.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it is,
From the amount I've played, I totally agree.
it
It's
really
incredible.
is.
Yeah.
the
and
the
yeah,
story, the plot is very interesting. But the just the set piece, the set pieces, the combat, it all comes together for
Mm-hmm.
an excellent game.
yeah. I think I mean, it's an overused word at this point, but the atmosphere of this game, the
So
like
good.
revolution French,
Yeah,
almost like
Mm-hmm.
post-apocalyptic iRobot premise is just like it's a
yeah.
winner. Um,
Yeah.
all of the environments just feel so, the French music in the background, and it just
hmm
all with
The
this kind of
music,
grim Pinocchio setting. The music
um,
is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
music has.
Yeah,
I feel like it's becoming more and more common in games, but I feel like it wasn't as prevalent for a while. But the music was standout and really elevated the game, and just
yeah. And I love when a game not
again
only has great music, but it incorporates it in a gameplay way. And
into the
this game
game.
has
Yeah,
you finding records throughout the world, and you actually bring them back to the hub area, and you can play the records. And there's actually a gameplay mechanic tied to it. And it just feels so cool to come back to the hub, put on a record, go
Mm-hmm.
about doing your business, and listening to what new track you got. Like it incorporates it into the game rather than it just being on in the background. And it's so memorable. And some of those tracks, I think, will be very nostalgic for me as years go by, from
yeah,
the time spent in Lies of P. The other thing I'll say, the combat is perfect. It is,
yeah.
they somehow, and I think this is the studio's first game, and I don't understand, but they perfectly understand what makes a FromSoft game good, what makes a FromSoft game excellent. They mimicked it to perfection, and then the things they added on top of it, the things they innovated with, make it better. Like it's not like you go, oh man, they perfectly nailed FromSoft, but I wish they hadn't tacked on this other stuff. I don't, that makes it worse. It makes it better. And the combat's amazing. And then the other thing I'll say, yeah, like you said, the story, it's much more in your face than a FromSoft game, and I think it's better for it. There's actual moments and characters you care about and
There
things that
there
happen, and
was
you're like,
there was a
what?
moment or two that were a little bit emotional and
Yeah.
and had some good emotional payoff.
Which it's crazy to get that in a FromSoft game. All the bosses, I think the bosses were incredible in this game. Not a
Yeah,
letdown at
I
all. Maybe the highlight.
there's there's one or two bosses I can think of that are like a little bit lower, but almost every boss in the game was a top tier boss, and
Yeah.
I absolutely loved it.
And I think the last thing to add is that I remember when we started it, because we started it while you were here. We got like 15 hours in, and I remember we were thinking like, oh, are we getting to the last area? Like, we
Yeah,
played
we
Timesia, and we were kind of wondering like how double A is this game?
we
how much
really
budget did they have? And it
we
kind of
Mm-hmm.
really
feels
thought we
like
were like one area maybe from the end.
the way the plot progresses makes you kind of think like, oh, this could be like maybe the last area. Maybe there's a little bit extra after this area, but it's kind of led up to this area. This game is so large. Like it just keeps going, and it just keeps getting better. And
And
Wow.
by the end of it,
it
I was
absolutely
in
does not
disbelief.
overstay its welcome.
No, and I was just in disbelief that a first time studio was able to pull off something of this quality that was of this quantity. Like
Yeah.
hmm
blown away by
Yeah,
the studio.
yeah.
I can't
It's
wait. And when you finish the game, we won't talk spoilers for what one or two people might listen, but especially for Zach. But when you get to the end of the game, it's truly exciting to be like where this might go next.
yeah. I
They
was
clearly
gonna
have
Interesting.
they clearly have an idea for what's coming next, whether it's DLC or a sequel. It's
I
so cool. It's one of my
Awesome.
most look forward to game series developers now at this point.
Wow.
I was gonna touch on that too, vaguely, that the way it leaves off and that sets up for more it's hard to truly be excited because the knowledge that the next game and what follows that is just so far away that it's hard to realistically be excited about it now, but it has me more excited about video games than most things get me about where it
Yeah.
might go. So
I think it's nice to see that other studios, new studios, can do this.
New blood.
I think that's what we
doing it.
worry about. Yeah, we worry about
Yeah.
like, okay, is the industry lagging behind?
Is it coasting till it dies?
Has capitalism, has the inevitable entropy of capitalism destroyed video games? And maybe still, I don't know. But this feels like a ray of hope. Like it's a
At the
new
top end, it
studio.
has, but you see these new studios surfacing and
Yeah, and it shows
really,
they're able
really
to do,
showing passion for the art form,
yeah,
and
and they're able to
not
deliver.
these.
You don't need
yeah, and
to spend $300
like I
million
said,
to deliver this type of
Exactly.
experience.
That's what's so
like
cool
I
and
said
exciting.
when we first played Tynesia, that was that first like kind of glimmer of hope of like, oh, like someone other than FromSoft
Yeah,
can
this is
like
that on steroids.
can do this well. And then Lies of P came and it was like, oh snap, like this is the real deal.
Oh, more people can do this well, which is great because
Yeah.
then we don't have to just wait on
Yeah.
FromSoft.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
notably
absolutely.
missing, I think, is Armored Core 6. None of us got around to that. That's one of my
Yeah.
also
Yeah, didn't
wish
get
I
a
played
chance to
this
play
year,
it.
but 2024,
So I
I
still
think
look
I'm gonna
forward
get
to
to
it, but did not get to it.
So that was your 3 and my 2. So I guess we're
Yeah,
on to
3 and your
number
2.
2.
Mhm.
So well,
Zach, what do you have
did
for number
Zach
2?
do his number 3?
I haven't yet. I did my number 3 was Sekiro, so I can do my
Oh,
number
that's right.
2.
That's
Yep.
right. Yeah.
Yep,
Okay.
we're on to 2.
My number 2 was Bloodborne. Now,
Okay.
What? Oh, I
Bloodborne.
thought you already did Bloodborne.
No,
No, I
Bloodborne's
did
number 2 for
Bloodborne.
me.
Bloodborne was 7 for me.
Sekiro?
Beats it. This is that conversation
Hey, I
of
mean,
like
2 beats 3, my guy.
I know, right? But it's one of those things where it's like technically, I think Sekiro is maybe the best FromSoft game, and I love it.
But you liked Bloodborne more.
I think when I think of like a video game being immersive, like Bloodborne is one of those games where for like 3 months, 2-3 months, I was just in it constantly, and I just kept coming back. I did 3 playthroughs. I platinumed it. I just couldn't
As one
stop
does.
playing it, and I mean, I felt to an extent felt that way about Sekiro as well, but something about Bloodborne just drew me in, and I felt like a kid just obsessively playing a video game. I think one of the things Bloodborne did that I really liked that Sekiro had less of was it felt like I did more exploration of the world than I did in Sekiro. Like Sekiro was very combat focused for me, which was great. It's the best
Yeah.
combat I've ever played. But something about exploring Bloodborne, this like haunted Lovecraftian nightmarescape, and unraveling like the hunter's dream and figuring out these like the weird plots of what is going on in
Yeah.
Yharnam. It all just came together in such an interesting way. And then I think the progression too of like me getting better and better at that game and then playing the old Hunters DLC, it was just, and again, we talk about music, the music in Bloodborne, especially in the DLC, man, some incredible moments. And it's a game. I played it 3 times to get the platinum this year. And I loved every second of it. And I mean, I loved every second of Sekiro as well, but it's hard
Hey,
because they're doing
nice.
slightly different things. And
I
I could
respect it
also,
because as you're describing it, I can think if I had one critique of Sekiro, and I've never really put my finger on it, I guess, but the world doesn't feel as perfectly interconnected as FromSoft's
It's
other games do. It feels more
that's one
like
of the few
big
things about it
paths
that it
that
doesn't.
just branch off and die. Like they branch off and then they end.
they do.
Whereas,
It funnels
Bloodborne,
you
Dark
to your
Souls 3,
next.
they feel like this web.
Yeah, it feels like you're in
But
this
Sekiro
labyrinth.
doesn't do that very well, and I do agree that I think
And-
the world design is lesser
And
in that way.
one of my little bit of disappointments with Bloodborne was the area variety, but where it really was just excellent was the atmosphere and the ambiance that it created was
In the
very
depth
thick
and the layers.
and very on point. Exactly, I think what they were going for. And then I think the interconnectedness of the levels that FromSoft Souls games have become known for. I think maybe Bloodborne is the best example of that. I think they did that maybe the best there.
Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, I think Sekiro, it was all a means to get you to the next combat encounter. And rightly so, because combat in that game is literally, I think, perfect. It's incredible,
It's a lot more
especially for the
simple and
time it was
straightforward
made.
of a game. Yeah.
I think it's good for that. I don't know that. I mean, I think Sekiro works really well for what it's doing. And if someone said, "I think Sekiro is the best FromSoft game or my favorite game," that makes total sense. Like,
And
it's
it
incredible. I'm like, these edging each other out is like,
and
it's
it's
such a
like I
hard
was
choice.
saying,
But
For
um,
sure.
all of the FromSoft games are so good, but it kind of comes into what do you personally, what weighs heavier for you? Does combat and bosses weigh heavier? Does area and atmosphere weigh heavier for you? And so everyone weighs things a little bit differently. And
yeah,
so
and for
yeah.
me,
Some of
it
it's
was
even
kind of
more
the
intrinsic than that,
combination,
or
right?
less.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was the combination because I felt like Bloodborne's combat was not perfect, but it was incredibly good. And like the
Hmm.
aggressive nature, the healing mechanic, um,
The weapons, the
the
trick
trick
weapons.
weapons were so good. Staggering with like a
Trick weapons were
gunshot,
cool.
all of that came together with like the vibe of the world and the creatures. And then some of the best boss fights are like the old Hunters DLC has some of the best boss fights ever that are up there with, some of these other things. So yeah, it is. It kind of depends on what you're going to prioritize at the end of the day, but I just love it.
Well, there you
Um,
have it.
and
Bloodborne's great.
Bloodborne can
and
be number
just
2
kind
of
of
2023.
one last thing, kind of just adding on to everything you were saying, that I just loved about Bloodborne, and I think it did better than anything I've ever played, was the world and the lore and the mystery of it all.
Yeah.
Figuring out what's really been going on this whole time,
Mhm.
and that like
That's true.
becoming aware of certain things, like
The
it
insight was cool.
is one of the
Yeah.
it's one of the coolest aha moments and realizations, just world building wise, I've ever
Totally.
Yeah.
experienced in a game.
I completely agree.
Very cool. Well, there you have. Okay,
All right.
Bloodborne above Sekiro, and both in your top 5 probably. Calvin, did you do 2 yet? What's your 2?
No, so my two is Hades.
Oh,
Which
Nice.
what was that for you?
I think it was 9.
9.
Oh gosh, that's so
8.
low.
9. No, it was 9.
That's gross.
I had a hard
Um,
time ranking it, but go ahead and
yeah.
gush about it if you'd like.
The real short of it is that, as I've reflected on it, Hades is one of those games that it just clicked with me and resonated, and it left such an impression that anytime I think back on it, I
What's
think
the
I'm
defining
so
thing
fond
that
about it.
left the impression, do you think, of the game? What aspect?
Um,
Because it's really an enigma, the fact that it's a
I know.
roguelike
That
that also
because
incorporates story heavily.
I think the story is a big part of it. And I think building out the world and the story, and meeting characters and finding their stories, it keeps you excited and interested to keep going back for further runs. Um, because it's more than just trying to get further or do better than last time. You want to progress actual people's stories and connections and relationships.
Relationships. Yeah.
That was just so fascinating and made the roguelike aspects so much more approachable and fun for me.
Yeah.
The visuals and the music, just 10 out of 10. I mean, again, the music was amazing, and the way it was incorporated in a few other ways outside of just background tracks while you play. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it was an
Man, if that's
elevated
the
experience
case,
for me.
I mean, two for you. You've got to go back and play Bastion because there's
Yeah, and
so much of
I
Bastion's
have it. I
DNA
plan to.
in
Yeah.
Hades. I mean, as soon as I picked up Hades, I was like, "Holy crap, this is Bastion!" Like the music, um, the art style is. I think there's even a track from Bastion that's played in a specific area in Hades that I
Yeah.
remembered. I was like, "That's from Bastion."
Um,
So yeah,
but yeah, it was also a surprise for me because I went into it expecting it to be a good game, but I really had no idea if it would be for me, if I would like it, because I kind of went into it already knowing I'm like, I don't really like roguelikes. It's not my type of game. It's not what I
yeah,
enjoy. But I was like, I know this one's a little different and more approachable, so I just was unsure, and I ended up just being sucked in. And I think I put over 200 hours in the game. I platinumed it.
Nice.
I continued
Holy
playing after
crap!
the platinum,
Put
to
200
wrap
hours
up
in
some
Hades.
things that there was no trophy for. Like I got so
Couldn't
sucked
get
into that
enough.
game
Crazy.
more than I do for most games. So
That's how you know. That's how
Wow.
you know it deserves a spot
yeah,
like that.
That's how you
that's
know
that's
you
why
really
it's number
might be
2.
with it.
Yeah,
That's
Hades.
great. For me,
I think I played
go
Hades in
ahead.
2022, and I didn't finish it, which is why it's not on the list or anything. But I really like Hades, and I agree that like for someone who's not huge into roguelites, that brought me right in. And I agree with the elevated experience. Like it very much becomes something greater. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally agree.
Did you not have
Well,
as much time in it, Levi?
I think I had around 100, maybe 110.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I had over
I'm
200,
just maybe I'm
and
just better at Hades than you.
maybe I think we looked back. I think we compared because we may have been together at the time when I or could check. You can check the record on like all of your attempts, and I think
Oh yeah, it does keep a
our
catalog of that.
attempt of our first completion of like the final boss of actually beating the
It's
game the
pretty
first
similar,
time
I thought.
was very similar. But
You might have even been
um,
ahead of me. So interesting. Yeah, for me,
yeah,
I think what it comes down to is I've become more accustomed to and I enjoy roguelike games much more in recent years than I went from zero to like I enjoy them now. But at the end of the day, even with what Hades did narratively, I still just don't click with roguelikes enough. Well, the problem is roguelikes to me prey on this junk food game mentality where it's just one more run, one more run, one more run, and it's super addictive. But it also feels very superficially elongated in playtime. And so because of that, it's like junk food. I get into it and I enjoy it and I'm like, man, this is so fun. I gotta play another run. I gotta play another run. But when I'm looking back on it later, I'm like, man, that was a lot of runs. Like
hmm.
I almost wish it was just a
I feel
narrative
like
game.
if I
But
were to play it a second time for some reason, that would very much show its face. But
yeah, I mean,
looking
there's
back
no
on
there's
it,
no reason to
that
play it a
isn't.
second time. You would just
But
keep playing it.
looking back on it for me, that doesn't present an
Yeah,
issue at all. Like I just thoroughly enjoyed it. So and it very well might be what kind of opens the door to other roguelikes for me because I've never really played any before Hades, and I know they're not all
yeah,
going to be Hades, but I enjoy the formula enough that I'm willing to check out others now.
that's cool. Yeah, for
Nice.
me, it's like I enjoy playing them in the moment, but they don't have that lasting they don't leave a lasting impression for me. And
Yeah,
what it did from Hades, if Hades didn't have that narrative element, it would have been outside my top 10 for sure. That narrative element is
yeah,
impressive, impressively woven through the game, kind of like a genre breaking innovation, to be honest. And we've seen that now with God of War Valhalla, even recently. And I think we'll
Yeah.
see more really start to, I mean, Returnal kind of did it, but weaving that narrative into that more gamified
hmm
concept of a
and
roguelike.
Which I
just
think helps improve the junk food feeling
and
because
just the
you're
It
getting an
does.
addition to the
It pulls you
experience
along
along the
much
way.
better.
Yeah.
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 and just the very base concept of Hades just works so well for a roguelike. The fact that you are literally
Right. Yeah.
in hell trying to get out, and so when you die, you just come back to this. Like it all
Right.
works
It makes
narratively
yeah.
in a
Yeah.
way that is
That's
less
true.
video gamey.
Hmm.
All right. Well, as we crest our 2 hour mark and the sun sets, gentlemen, let's get to our top,
Number
our
one.
favorite game. Favorite game number one of 2023. Um, I have has anyone does anyone have a number one game that wasn't brought up yet?
Mine wasn't brought up really.
Mine
Calvin,
was.
Yeah.
yours was. All right. We'll leave Zach for last then.
Okay.
And I'll start because I think mine's. I mean, we all know what it is. Probably at this point, it's Tears of the Kingdom,
Yeah.
and I just couldn't keep it out of the number one
I
spot. It's been
just
long enough.
I can't argue with that. There's no way
I can't
to
either.
rightfully argue that.
What was Tears for you, Calvin?
Number 4.
Number four. Yeah, I just couldn't. Breath of the Wild since release has been my favorite game of all time because there's no game that I go back to as regularly or that I want to be in like Breath of the Wild. I've played a lot of it, even on PC, and just with the updated graphics and whatever, it's an incredible looking game. And to me, it's a timeless game. Like it just really
Hmm.
is. And as much as Tears of the Kingdom treads a lot of familiar ground, um, it almost feels like it's funny because I don't think Tears of the Kingdom replaces Breath of the Wild. I still have an affinity for Breath of the Wild and what that game is. But in many ways, Tears of the Kingdom feels like the definitive version of Breath of the Wild. Um,
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
it's just like everything is culminated in this. And not only do you have all of Hyrule, and it's changed a bit, there's some similarities. There's landmarks, obviously, that aren't going to move. We didn't have an earthquake that changed everything. But like, um, the fact that the Sky Isles were as cool as they were, because I remember
Yeah.
watching that in the gameplay presentations, being like, man, is that going to feel like weird to get around on, or is it going to feel cumbersome? Is it going to be feel incongruent to the gameplay of Breath of the Wild? And the mechanics they introduced with the rising through the ground, um, mixed with other things and the vehicles you can build, there's nothing more magical than exploring the Sky Islands in Tears of the
Mhm.
Kingdom, and how you're just thousands of feet off the ground and everything's golden, and then the sun sets and you can see the sunset while you're like in the stratosphere of Hyrule
Yeah.
and hopping from island to island and solving puzzles. Magical. And then the fact that you can do that, and this was a secret until launch. We didn't know this. We kind of wondered, like, is there going to be more? That doesn't feel like enough. Lo and behold, there is an entire section underground of Hyrule as large as Hyrule, and you can jump off of a sky island and skydive past Hyrule into the depths of Hyrule, and you're underground hundreds of feet and it's pitch black, and all of a sudden the gameplay is completely changed from
Yeah. Without
magical and
loading,
wondersome
without
without loading
loading
on a
on
Yeah,
a Nintendo
Switch,
seamlessly.
Switch.
on a
Yeah,
Nintendo Switch from
Yeah.
1973, and
which just puts all
boggles the
other
mind.
so many other Switch games to shame. Where it's like we tend to maybe say
Yeah,
like, oh,
anything
the Switch
from
is limiting it.
Pokemon
It's like, no, the Switch is
Yeah.
to
not
people.
limiting
Yeah.
it. We know
Yeah,
for
I
sure
mean,
now.
it's just it's wizardry that they got this thing running. But the fact that you can do that, and then all of a sudden, thousands of feet, you're underground, and the gameplay completely changes, and now you're kind of like you're slowly walking around in the dark, shooting, lanterns to light up these giant caverns, and you don't know where you're going, or it's such a different experience. And
Yeah.
I think the
Yeah.
fact that they did that, the fact that the Sky Islands to the depths, on top of a fairly changed Hyrule, but that is kind of more Breath of the Wild, and then everything else is better. The stables are better. There's actual, like,
Mhm.
every stable has a checklist
Hmm.
of things to do, people to talk to, little quests like going to get pictures for people. I absolutely loved that. It was one of my favorite parts of the game, was being a photographer, going to wait for a specific moment at a specific location to capture the perfect photo to bring back that they would actually frame and put in the stable. And then the fact that I could go do that at my own place. I could make my own house and put
Hmm.
pictures and
That was
frames,
awesome.
and that
I
just so
spent more
much of this
time than I
game.
should have trying to make the perfect house.
That was amazing. Like, I
Yeah,
hope that I don't think they'll ever update it, but if they made it so you could build
I
a
know,
bigger
more than
house and have more
15.
frames, I'd be wandering
Yeah,
Hyrule taking pictures, trying to just build these awesome
yeah,
Have a
frames in my
gallery.
house and a
Yeah.
gallery.
yeah.
And then on top of that, the story I thought was so much better than Breath of the Wild. I know a lot of
Yes.
people complained about Breath of the Wild's story because it was very minimal. And I enjoyed it for that, because I thought the quiet was what Breath of the Wild was about and what it mastered. But in this game, it ramps up, it culminates, and you have actual story beats and moments that are epic and deserving of the Zelda franchise. Like
Yeah.
truly epic moments that you won't forget in this game.
Yeah, there
Um,
were a few story
Toward
moments
the end, it's amazing.
that gave me chills and like just were some of the
Yeah.
highest highs of gaming stories that I've really seen.
So to you,
And I
Zach,
think
is
that's
someone who
elevated.
burnt out
Yeah. You go
real
ahead.
quick, to someone who burnt out on Breath of the Wild and may not get to Tears for a little while, just make sure that you beat Tears of the Kingdom, because unlike Breath of the Wild, it has actual plot, story, character moments that are really impactful and
Yeah.
worth
Yeah.
seeing.
I'm going to do it this year because burnt out is maybe not quite the right word, because I loved what I played. And I feel like if I had finished that very well could have been in my top three or even my top one or two. Um, because I mean, I feel like the narrative stuff is so much more powerful in Tears of the Kingdom because of the quiet solitude you
Yeah,
had
because of
for
the
Yeah.
80
bases.
hours in Breath of the Wild, it builds off of that in such a beautiful way. And yeah, I feel like it does such a good job of like innovating on the game. Like we kept wondering, like kind of like the God of War or Spider-Man question of like, okay, well, it's just more
Yeah, I
Breath
didn't
of the
think it could be
Wild,
done.
and it somehow is and isn't in like the best way. It's like
And
it's very much
just
is
about
in the like continuation, but it's not.
Yeah, you're like, I just want
and
more Breath of
similar
the
to
Wild, but I hope it's not the same. And they somehow
They
did it.
did.
They nailed it.
similar to being able to like the size and of the world, being able to jump from the sky islands to the depths, how that was just like it felt like a game breaking thing that shouldn't be able to be possible. Just about every one of the abilities felt the same. The fact that you could use Ultra Hand and
I
combine
was gonna
almost
say the fact that we
anything,
haven't even
the
brought
fact that
up
you can
Ultra Hand.
ascend through solid surfaces
Totally. Yeah.
anywhere almost.
And
It
it
just
works.
some of those
I
things,
never
yeah,
glitched out. I never popped
yeah,
out of geometry
Crazy.
trying to ascend through a cavern. I mean, there were times where I ascended from, a cavern up to the peak of a mountain, and it just works
yeah,
every
Just
time.
works.
And there's
yeah.
no glitches. This is one of the most polished. This is one of the most ambitious mechanical games I've ever played,
On a
and
Switch.
the most polished.
And
No,
on a
no
Switch, yeah.
glitches. Nothing weird happened, and the fact that you can build vehicles to traverse this area, people build mechs. I don't know how you do it. I've seen
Yeah,
people build cars, mechs. Like the sheer agency you have to build things in this game is
creative freedom.
just insanity. It's
Yeah.
just I feel bad for Tears of the Kingdom because I feel like it gets labeled as Breath of the Wild DLC and it's underappreciated,
That
and I
is, yeah,
don't know how the
Yeah, I
narrative
think
will
that
be years
label
from
is
now.
silly. Yeah.
that's crazy.
It is silly, and I don't know what the narrative will be years from now. But Tears of the Kingdom deserves to be recognized as a or the game of the year, because as
I know
Yeah,
it's
a
kind
or
of
the
it's kind of
game
a
ever.
shame. It's kind of a shame that this year was so packed because I feel like Baldur's Gate in a way deserves it, but I also feel like Tears of the Kingdom, like I feel like and Lies of P. I feel like we have multiple games that all feel like
Yeah,
they deserve that level of recognition, and they all happened to come out within like 6 months
yeah,
of each other.
and it felt kind of
Um,
like Baldur's Gate was the new hotness because it was surprise matters so
Surprise works.
much.
I think
Surprise and
surprise.
delight.
I
yeah,
I think and I think it was like genre changing for a different genre of
Yeah,
video game that we hadn't seen that type of. I think that's what Breath of the Wild did for Zelda
a
5 years
100%,
ago, and I think
100%.
Baldur's Gate did that for the RPG genre, and
Yeah,
so that's part of it. But yeah, I agree. And the more we talk about Tears of the Kingdom, the more I'm remembering things I was doing in it, and I was like, I need to go play that more because I
yeah.
I really love it, and
And there's so
having it
much
at
we didn't
5
touch
feels
on it at
wrong.
the time. It's
Yeah,
just
I
it's an
know.
amazing game, and I don't know how I'm
Yeah,
gonna rank it with Breath of the Wild or how to do that, or if I combine them. But like,
yeah.
yeah, Tears of the
ha-
Kingdom and Breath of the Wild are my favorite game of all time. Like, I don't know how I
having it
guess
at
that's
four
you know
feels wrong, and it's probably gonna be pretty high when I work it into my all time favorites. But it's just how
yeah,
it
it'll be
landed on
4
my
for
personal year.
2023,
So
but 2 all time somehow.
Yeah.
yeah, so it's again, it's the impression games leave on you. It's weird.
Well, thanks for
I
indulging. That's my game of the year. So
I think it ties nicely into my game of the year though. Can
go
you guess
ahead.
what my game?
Your game of the year. What you've listed Bloodborne and Sekiro. What else did you play? You didn't? Did
Oh,
you play Dark Souls 3 this year?
you
No, that was the year
That was
before.
last year.
I think
I don't
Calvin's
know
it's
what
playing
your
more
it.
game of the
connected
year
than
is.
you're thinking.
Let's just say it's
Oh,
incredibly
Breath of the Wild.
topical. Yeah, it's Breath of the Wild. So
That's
I
hilarious.
I started Breath of the Wild when it came out and I loved it, and then life was busy, like we were moving states, and so I got away from it. I picked up Breath of the Wild and I
That's
started
so
it from
funny.
from scratch. Early, like after beating Bloodborne, I started it from scratch early last year in preparation for Tears of the Kingdom, and I just got lost in Hyrule for like 3 months straight. I did pretty much everything. I didn't find all the Korok seeds. I'm not insane, but um, I did pretty much
You're
everything
not a
else.
streamer.
I did pretty much every side quest. I did the Champions Bout, like I did all the DLC stuff. Um, I found every single shrine, including DLC ones. Um, and Breath of the Wild is one of those games that it literally changed the way. This sounds so like cliche to say, but it changed the way I think about video games back when I first played it, and again when I played the full thing last year. And it did that to me as an adult in his 30s. Nothing has made me feel like that since I was, a kid or in my early teens. And the level of exploration and just joy. I think also, and I think they did some very counterintuitive things. Like you think video games, you think a fantasy game like Zelda, you think epic, and they took the route of we're going to go quiet and reflective, and in this giant world, and somehow,
Reflective is a great word.
and they made every like the
Yeah.
mechanics fit that, the ambiance, the soundtrack, the story, it all fits this reflective kind of vibe where you're in this like post-apocalyptic, but not like Mad Max post-apocalypse. Like there was an apocalypse and nature is healing,
It was
and you're out.
It's still
post-apocalyptic.
very
Yeah,
peaceful.
nature
The
is
world is
healing.
healing from a distant apocalypse,
Right,
which
the
we don't
world
get
is
enough
healing,
of.
and you're kind of, yeah. It was such a different take for fantasy
Yeah.
and for video games, and the joy of being in this quiet, there's birds chirping, the trill of a piano in the background, you're by a gurgling stream, and you're like, trying to send a message in a bottle down for some little dolphin kid or whatever. It's just the
Yeah.
most joyful experience I've ever had in gaming. It's Breath of the Wild is probably my number one game of all time, and it's my number one game of the year, and that's why I felt comfortable having Tears of the Kingdom at 5, is because I haven't finished it yet,
Yeah.
but I
No,
kind
that
of
makes
think of them
perfect
to
sense.
I think of them together as well. And so when I do eventually finish it, I'm sure I'll appreciate Tears of the
And
Kingdom so much
tears will
more.
creep up, and it'll be
And
high on
I
your list
think,
when you are ready to get to it and
yeah,
experience it
and
in
I think
full.
it's going to be
So
one of those things where it's like, I don't even know how to rank them in
I
association
know
with each
it's,
other.
yeah, exactly. That's where I'm at.
And so, like, I think I'll have the same problem. And I think, Tears of the Kingdom rightly builds off of what Breath of the Wild started. And yeah, Breath of the Wild is probably the best game I've ever played.
Heck yes. You
Yeah,
can't convince me that Breath of the Wild and or Tears of the Kingdom aren't the best games ever made. You just can't do
I
it.
would agree
yeah.
with that. I would agree with that
And
statement.
my 2 cents quickly on Breath of the Wild, since it's hard to talk about either of these games without waxing poetic, but for Breath of the Wild, a lot of what you touched on, and I did briefly as well. Um, so much of video games, they are an art form, and they are there to sometimes give you visceral experiences, thought provoking or intense, or to scare you or do some, to epic moments, and those are great. But on the other side of the coin, video games are there to kind of recharge and to be relaxing into,
Mm-hmm.
you're not working, you're not doing some of the other more stressful things, and
Yeah.
that's to me what Breath of the Wild is the best of any game I've ever played at doing.
Yeah.
Is just like you said, it's pensive, it's reflective, whether it's the music, the world design, the gameplay elements, everything is so peaceful. And there's something about that that feels so rejuvenating to sit down and
Mm-hmm.
play. And that's why, even to this day, I will still periodically throughout a year jump in and play 15, 20 minutes, a half an hour of Breath of the Wild and not do anything of consequence. I'll just hop
Yeah.
in, glide around, go maybe find a Korok, chop down a tree. Like, I don't really
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything. I have no goal. I just want to be in this world. I just want to hear the sounds of this world and just kind of, it just makes you take a breath and like relax and recharge. And it's amazing
Mm-hmm.
that a
Yeah.
game can do that.
Totally.
So
Yep.
I approve. I approve. All right, Calvin, what's your stupid game of the year that isn't Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom?
Yeah, it's funny because I feel at the same time the most out of place and the most mainstream because
Who'd have
my
thought?
game of the year is Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3.
Baldur's
Oh,
Gate
you
3.
haven't said Baldur's Gate
The
3.
Yeah.
I knew yours
The
was Baldur's
unknown.
Gate
Yeah.
3. He loves that game now. Yeah, he finished it though. He's the only one who finished it. So I guess
So
I
that's
am
you
the only
finished
one out
it.
of us that finished
Nice.
it. I barely finished it in December. Barely made the cutoff, but yeah, it was a similar situation with me with Hades, where I went into it knowing it was a good game. It was loved, like it was a quality game, but I didn't know if it would be for me. Um,
Yeah.
and so I was just unsure.
nor did I.
And same thing, I just got so sucked in. It took a minute. The beginning was a little slow, and I wasn't like hooked immediately, but towards the end of Act One, I got really hooked, and I
Didn't
I
stop.
was just obsessed. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it again similar to Hades. I've never really played many turn-based games. It's not really my style. Never gotten into them, and I'm might be open to them now because I loved the combat in this game. You guys talked about it being exhausting and a little draining, because of how complex and like how much is involved.
It's like
Um,
chess sometimes.
I
Yeah.
Yeah,
do
it's
I
like
do
chess.
agree,
It
and
is
I can't argue with that,
chess with
but it didn't
superpowers.
really affect me. Like I it didn't drain me.
Yeah,
I would finish like a combat encounter and be like, oh my gosh, and
I
like
want
let
more.
out a sigh of relief, but I wasn't exhausted and I would want to keep
Yeah.
going. And
totally.
so, um, yeah, between the story, um, the combat, and then just as we've talked about already, the sheer agency you have as the player, um, I kind of doubt I'm gonna get to a second or following playthroughs, but I am tempted because picking a different race, a different class, completely choosing to just how who you align with
Right.
and who you make friends with and enemies with
Who's your
completely
waifu?
changes everything. And yeah, and
Big decision.
it's insane. So
That's crazy, man.
it,
Yeah, and I
it
think it's
was
one of
one
those
of
things where, sorry, just real quick, I was going to say I think it's more daunting to think of playing Baldur's Gate 3 than it actually is.
I would agree with
yeah
Which
that.
is the problem. Which is the problem if you take a break. Which I needed a break, and I
yeah
will. I do know that I will get back to it and finish this game. But it's daunting to look at it and be like, "Oh, Baldur's Gate 3 is so cerebral and it takes so much work to play." When
yeah
you're in it, it's so enjoyable that you don't think about it and you're just playing it. So
yeah.
that's totally
Yeah.
true.
And I managed to play the whole thing start to finish with no breaks,
Nice.
which is a lot. But I just got so sucked in that it didn't
Yeah.
really occur to me. And going back to the combat, I really, again, it was a little bit new for me because I don't play those games often, but I loved the cerebral aspect of it and how there would be a couple encounters where like you'd walk in on this encounter and your entire top of your screen would fill up with enemies and it would just be
Yeah.
overwhelming. You'd be like, how the heck am I going to do this? And you slowly work your way through it. Sometimes you're sitting there with your character for like minutes trying to figure out what move to
Hmm.
do. And by the end, when you finally pull off the victory, it's so satisfying.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely the first game I've played that's it's not just turn based, but it's more of like a tactical turn base.
Hmm.
Which
Hmm.
I know there are games like that, like I think like an XCOM or something like that. But I've never played something where you're actually moving people around like chess, but it's also turn based.
Yeah.
And that was truly a fascinating element to get into. Apart
Yeah.
from like board games that we've played, which obviously that's an
Yeah.
element to board games. I've never done that in a video game, and
Yeah.
it's really fascinating to realize that like you fail an encounter, and you're like, okay, what I need to come in, I need to sneak in a different direction, or I need to
Hmm.
do this thing to start off the encounter with leverage or with a higher
Right.
ground or something, and it completely changes the
Yeah.
entire flow of the battle. So um,
Um, and then
unique, very unique combat.
all that, and then also the fact the role playing aspect of it.
Yeah.
I it's funny because I didn't like my first character, but I only got like an hour in, so I it was early enough. I scrapped that. I created a new character, really liked, and I got so into my character. Um, really liked my character, and then the relationships you have with your party members. I got so invested in that. The emotional payoffs and the story payoffs of their stories were very good. Um, yeah, just it all came together for my
It's
favorite game.
great. It's everything I love in fantasy and video games and tabletop. Like I've played some D&D and this is D&D basically with made for a video game. And I had always thought that if that was done it would be just kind of like I don't know, kind of like when you adapt a movie into a video game. I just didn't think it would
Yeah,
be
be
done
like
well. This is perfect
maybe
for
get the
what
job
it's doing.
done. Maybe.
Yeah, and
And
it's
the fact some other small things, the fact that again with how many different ways things can go,
yeah.
different outcomes, all of it is excellently voice acted. Um,
Hmm.
it's just impressive. The
But it's
That's what I
music,
wanted.
precise.
yeah,
My final 2 cents on it, um, that I just think are the biggest thing to shout out and not be lost in game of the year, whatever this and that, is the heart and time and effort that went into this game is so abundantly clear. It's just in a world where AAA video games are becoming the bane of video game existence. And corporations are just cash grabbing at every turn and putting zero effort into things and microtransactions. It's just amazing what Larian Studios did. You can tell
Yeah.
they really just cared about the game and the playing experience, and the voice acting I think is the biggest thing, where it's just like, I have an anecdote of somewhere in Act 2. There's this area I was at, and you can have, depending on your character, you can have the ability to speak to animals, or you can use a potion to speak to animals, and every animal in the game is voice acted. Like, someone voice acted lines for this
So
animal that
amazing.
no one may ever talk to. And I ended
Yeah.
up talking to these rats scurrying around this dungeon like area, and he was like really douchey to me, and I was like, what the heck, rat, like chill. And he was just super pissed off. And I found more rats, and I eventually unraveled a rat quest line that because I continued to kind of check in with these rats, and I followed them and I saw what was going on, I found this whole quest line that would have been impossibly easy to miss. Like,
Yeah.
I would venture to say 90% of people probably miss this entirely. 99 probably start it and don't finish it. And
Yeah.
it was just one of those things where I'm like, holy crap, this was the tiniest thing. And it
The
was
attention to
voice acted
detail.
from
Yeah.
start to finish.
Yeah.
And it was a full blown quest line that didn't have a quest marker over it. It was a rat running around a dungeon. Like, I don't know. It just blows my mind. And the fact that
Yeah.
that amount of quality is put in, and I don't know, I can't speak to Act 3. I've heard maybe there's some technical difficulties that pop up in Act 3, but really from start to finish, at least from Act 1 and Act 2, the quality doesn't degrade. It's just every
I
area
didn't
is
experience
dense.
anything with Act 3
Every
like that.
area is dense with things to do, things to interact with, things to miss,
Mhm.
things to make crazy decisions on that will impact the entire world.
Speaking of
It's
dense,
incredible.
Act 3 was continued to blow my mind with how dense the world was
Oh,
and
that's
full of things to
terrifying.
do.
That's so awesome.
But the last two things I wanted to touch on as quick as I can, just about it, were the music. The music was
Yeah,
another
music's
standout for
great.
me that stuck with me. I was even listening to some of the tracks from the game on Spotify just because like they were such impressive moments of the game that I listened to them again. I'm like, oh yeah, and they really stick with you. So the music was great. And then uh, one last thing to touch back on the agency and how differently things can go depending on
Yeah.
how you play. You guys obviously haven't finished the game. I have another friend who's currently playing through it. He's not finished with the game, but as I was playing through it, as best we could, I would, talk with you guys and eh, like compare notes, how differently things went, and it just cracks me up that for me, I ended up literally an hour into the game. I ended up killing one of what can be your companion. I ended up killing a companion and
Oh
just
my gosh, that's
I went with
amazing.
it, and some other decisions like that are just like tragically hilarious that you would never expect
You'd
to be
never even
possible.
know.
And
Yeah. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
and you can have a full on relationship with this person, and within an hour of the game, they're dead. And so
That's
it's crazy.
so crazy. I will say, I mean,
That
because
is
I got
crazy.
like 15 hours in, made a new character, and I restarted. I'm like 3 hours in now. I've already noticed quite a few differences of like meeting a party member I've already met, and then I have an interaction, and it goes totally differently because I'm a different race, a different person,
Hmm.
and I maybe selected something different. And it's like, oh, I don't remember this happening when I talked to them last time. It's mind
Because
blowing.
it didn't,
It's,
yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
The
crazy.
theme song, speaking briefly to what you said, the theme song for Baldur's Gate 3 is probably my video game song of the year. I think it's iconic. Um,
yeah,
I have it stuck in my head frequently. Um, so that's great. And then I guess one negative I'll say is that this game is best played accepting your fate, but the game at the same time encourages frequent saves and reloading because
yeah,
there's no other way to deal with fail states sometimes. And
yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that can sometimes lead to playing the game in a less meaningful or impactful way,
I tried to
because it
find the
starts to
balance
encourage
there.
saves coming.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
I'm
tried to
bummed
find
that
the
it
balance
wasn't a way
where
around that.
Yeah.
I I would occasionally save scum, but I tried to do it like very sparingly, and big things, meaningful
Yeah.
things that didn't go my way. I would try my best to leave those be and let that play out.
I
Yeah.
think that's part
That's
of the
certainly the
replay
way to
value,
play it.
though, I think there's a replay. I know we talk about like, oh, I don't know if I could ever replay this, and maybe not, but play the first time and try not to like, do too much of the saving, but use it when you really want to influence how your story goes. If you want certain things to happen, certain relationships to come to fruition or whatever. But then when you play it again, go in and totally accept your fate. Like
I know I've
this
thought
is
about that. That's just an interesting playthrough. If you did do a little bit of save scumming, literally just
Like
accepting
with permadeath and
everything.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
just be a
Like
yes
permanent
man for the whole
consequences
thing.
is
Yeah,
just it's just its own interesting playthrough.
yeah,
To see if you can even make
Um,
it to the end of the
and
game, honestly.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. When you guys do eventually finish the game, definitely have either good volume or headphones for the final like credit song, because
Okay,
that song went hard. It was good.
awesome. I
Good
can't
to
wait.
know. Well, there you have it. Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, and Baldur's Gate 3. I think those are,
It's a
I mean,
solid
there's
lineup for number
nothing to
one
shake a
picks.
stick at there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, as the sun sets on Calvin, and we won't be able to see him for much longer.
Yeah,
Before
I
we
think we
sign
can.
off, though, real quick, um, let's give one. This is a fun exercise. If you guys have anything, we'll be brief. One thing from 2023, not gaming related, media, but not gaming related, that really stood out to you, and one thing you're looking forward to gaming in 2024. For me, um, and it's probably going to be the same for Calvin, to be honest. We started reading the Stormlight Archive and Way of Kings, and that was, per Zach the Bookman's
Yes.
recommendations, and you knocked it out of the park, man. It was an excellent book, and I am really glad to be that I am enjoying reading. I don't know the last time I've really thoroughly enjoyed reading. So that's been great, because sometimes you get tired of looking at screens. We look at screens too
Mm-hmm.
much, man. It's nice to look at a page in some, in some sunlight maybe or whatever, and that's just really rejuvenating in a different way. So
What you need
that was
sometimes.
fantastic. Yeah, it's so good to have that. I love that now I'm in the second book now and just thoroughly enjoying it. Um, and then 2024, I actually don't know. I feel like there's so many unknowns for 2024, more than usual. A lot of studios, we don't know what they're working on. I really don't know what's in store in 2024. I wonder if it's going to be a
Yeah.
real down year, or if we just don't know what everyone's working on. The only thing I can think of is right off the bat here, we're going to get Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2.
Yep.
What's it called?
That's where my head
Rebirth?
went. Yeah.
Yeah. And we get that at the end of February. So that's coming really
It's coming
quick.
up.
I mean, I was surprised when I saw how fast that's coming. So it's going to be awesome to jump back into that story and those characters.
Totally. Totally.
Cal?
Yeah. I mean, you already knew that my non gaming uh, claim was going to be the Stormlight Archive. So I
Yes.
started that
There
as
you go.
well. Yeah, it's been amazing. I finished the first book, Way of Kings, a month two months ago, maybe. I don't remember. And I'm well into the second book and just absolutely loving it. I've enjoyed these books as much or more than a lot of the games I've played. So it's some top notch content.
Yeah, if I were throwing it in my game of the year list, it would be in the top 3,
Yep.
Yeah,
in my
Oh,
absolutely.
I love
so
hearing that. Stormlight
Um,
is so good. Yeah.
and as far as games for next year, I I don't follow games as closely as you guys, so I'm not as aware of that. But I would have to probably just agree with Final Fantasy Rebirth is
Yeah.
very exciting because it has a date and we
Yeah.
know about
Right.
it, and the first game remake
and the
was
way it
an
ended, and
exceptional experience,
I can't wait to see
and
where the
I
characters go.
what they did with the combat
Yeah.
was game changing, and so
Yeah.
I'm very excited about that as well.
Yeah, for
Nice.
sure.
Well,
Got
I'm
anything
thrilled
different?
to. Yeah, I can give something a little different. I'm thrilled to hear you guys love Stormlight. I would pick that, but I read it. I read it a few years ago. So Stormlight. If you haven't read the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson, go check it out. Even if you don't read super often, like those books are just so good, and I'm so glad to be convincing more people to read them. Um, I would say for me, other than like video games, man, I don't know. The Godzilla movie that just came out was surprisingly incredible. I just saw
Is
that
that
a
minus
couple weeks
one?
ago.
Interesting.
-1. I didn't go in expecting much.
Is that
Like I
one
like
entirely in
Godzilla.
Japanese?
Yeah, it's subtitles.
Okay.
Um,
Oh wow.
and it is one of the best movies I've seen in years. It's so
Oh,
good. It's so
interesting.
good. Yeah, it's epic Godzilla action, but like the writing is great, the characters are great, and I don't know the way like it's set in like post World War II Japan, and just the way they tie together like what Japan is going through with Godzilla is a destructive force was actually incredible. So check that movie out. It's really good.
Hmm,
Um,
That's
as we
good to
look
know.
in,
Yeah, it wasn't on
yeah,
my
it's
radar. So
check it out. It's good.
I knew of
Um,
it, but yeah, I wasn't really thinking about
yeah,
it.
it's I just yeah because there's been other Godzilla movies in recent years. This is
A
like
lot
stands
of
out.
Godzilla
This
movies.
is like, in my opinion, this is like Dune level quality of movie. It's a very different type of movie, but
Interesting.
it's like really, really good. Um, in terms of what I'm looking forward to next year, obviously Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. You guys talked about that. Like that's probably top of the list. Other than like Hollow Knight Silk Song, try not to get my hopes up for that one. There's a couple other interesting things. I think Black Myth Wukong and Dragon's Dogma 2 both look
oh, I
really
hope that
interesting.
comes out. I don't feel confident, but if it does, dude, that game looks incredible.
It does. And Dragon's Dogma is like a really beloved franchise, and the second one comes out, and I think that one has a date. I think it's like March or April. So I'm
Yeah.
kind of curious to see what that's all about. But yeah, I think this year's more going to be more open and interesting. Like I feel like 2023, we knew a lot of the big hitters, and we had to like kind of be ready for them. There was a couple of surprises, but I feel like 2024 is going to be
A
more.
lot of unknown.
Let's see
Yeah.
what happens.
Will it be filled or will it not? You'll have to stay tuned to find out, I guess.
Yep.
Well, there you go. 2.5 hours. Thank you for listening to us wax poetic ramble on about games for that long. Future us, most likely. Um, but yeah, thanks for tuning in. I'm really glad that we were able to get together. I know this dragged on, and we all probably have things we have to get to, but I'm really glad we made some time to sit down and do this for
Yeah. Same.
posterity, and
Definitely.
hopefully we'll be able to do it again next year. So, thanks for joining us, and yeah, I guess that's it. We'll catch you next time here on NeverLag.